Section 31, Volume 3, of the Book of 1,000 Nights and a Night, translated by Richard Burton. This is a Librivox recording. All Librivox recordings are in the public domain. For more information, or to volunteer, please visit librivox.org. Recording by Rebecca Case. The Book of 1,000 Nights and a Night, Volume 3, Section 31. When it was the 197th night, she said, "It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that when Marzawan looked upon Kamar al-Zaman and knew that it was indeed he whom he was seeking, he cried, 'Exalted be Allah, who hath made his shape even as her shape, and his complexion as her complexion, and his cheek as her cheek.' Upon this Kamar al-Zaman opened his eyes and gave earnest ear to his speech. And, when Marzawan saw him inclining to hear, he repeated these couplets. I see thee full of song, and plaint and love's own ecstasy, delighting in describing all the charms of loveliness. Art smit by stroke of love, or hath shaft shot wounded thee? None save the wounded ever show such signals of distress. Ho thou, crown the wine cup and sing me singular. Praises to Salema, all Rabab, Tanum addressed. Go round the grapevine sun, which for mansion hath a jar, whose east the cup-boy is, and hear my mouth that opes for west. I'm jealous of the very clothes that dare her sides enroll, when she veils her dainty body of the delicatest grace. I envy every goblet of her lips that taketh toll, when she sets the kissing cup on that sweetest kissing place. But deem not by the keen-edged scimitar I'm slain. The hurts and harms I dree are from arrows of her eyes. I found her fingertips, as I met her once again, deep reddened with the juice of the wood that ruddy dyes, and cried, Thy palms thou stainedst when far away was I, and this is how thou payest one distracted by his pine. Quoth she, and kindled in my heart a flame that burned high, speaking as one who cannot hide of longing love the sign. By thy life, this is no dye used for dyeing, so forbear thy blame, nor in charging me with falsing love persist. But when upon our parting day I saw these haste to fare, the while were bared my hand and my elbow and my wrist, I shed a flood of blood-red tears, and with fingers brushed away. Hence blood-reddened were the tips, and still blood-red they remain. Had I wept before she wept, to my longing love a prey, before repentance came, I had quit my soul of pain. But she wept before I wept, and I wept to see her care, and I said, All the merit to precedent. Blame me not for loving her, nor on self of love I swear. For her sake, for her only, these pains my soul torment. She hath all the lair of Luqman, and Yusuf's beauty lief, sweet singer David's voice, and Miriam's chastity. While I've all Jacob's mourning, and Jonah's prison grief, and the sufferings of Job and old Adam's history. Yet kill her not, albeit of my love for her I die. But ask her why my blood to her was lawful. Ask her why. When Marzawan recited this ode, the words fell upon Kamar al-Zaman's heart as freshness after fever and returning health. And he sighed and, turning his tongue in his mouth, said to his sire, O my father, let this youth come and sit by my side. And Scheherazade perceived the dawn of the day, and ceased to say her permitted say. When it was the 198th night, she said, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that Kamar al-Zaman said to his sire, "O my father, allow this youth to come and sit by my side." Now when the king heard these words from his son, he rejoiced with exceeding joy, though at the first his heart had been set against Marzawan, and he had determined that the stranger's head needs must be stricken off. But when he heard Kamar al-Zaman speak, his anger left him, and he arose and drawing Marzawan to him, seated him by his son, and turning to him said, "Praised be Allah for thy safety." He replied, "Allah preserve thee, and preserve thy son to thee," and called down blessings on the king. Then the king asked, "From what country art thou?" And he answered, "From the islands of the inland sea, the kingdom of King Gahayur, lord of the isles and the seas and the 7 palaces." Quoth King Shahriman, "Maybe thy coming shall be blessed to my son, and Allah vouchsafe to heal what is in him." Quoth Marzawan, "Inshallah, naught shall be save what shall be well." Then turning to Kamar al-Zaman, he said to him in his ear, unheard of the king and his court, "O my lord, be of good cheer, and hearten thy heart, and let thine eyes be cool and clear. And with respect to her for whose sake thou art thus, ask not of her case on thine account. But thou keepest thy secret and fellest sick, while she told her secret, and they said she had gone mad. So she is now in prison, with an iron chain about her neck, in most piteous plight. But, Allah willing, the healing of both of you shall come from my hand." Now when Kamar al-Zaman heard these words, his life returned to him, and he took heart, and felt a thrill of joy, and signed to his father to help him sit up. And the king was like to fly for gladness, and rose hastily, and lifted him up. Presently, of his fear for his son, he shook the kerchief of dismissal, and all the Emars and Wazirs withdrew. Then he set 2 pillows for his son to lean upon, after which he bade them perfume the palace with saffron, and decorate the city, saying to Marzawan, "By Allah, O my son, of a truth thine aspect be a lucky and a blessed." And he made as much of him as he might, and called for food, and when they brought it, Marzawan came up to the prince and said, "Rise, eat with me." So he obeyed him and ate with him, and all the while the king invoked blessings on Marzawan and said, "How auspicious is thy coming, O my son!" And when the father saw his boy eat, his joy and gladness redoubled, and he went out and told the prince's mother and all the household. Then he spread throughout the palace the good news of the prince's recovery, and the king commanded the decoration of the city, and it was a day of high festival. Marzawan passed that night with Kamar al-Zaman, and the king also slept with them in joy and delight for his son's recovery. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of day, and ceased saying her permitted say. When it was the 199th night, she said, "It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that King Shahriman also passed that night with them in the excess of his joy for his son's recovery. And when the next morning dawned, and the king had gone away and the 2 young men were left alone, Kamar al-Zaman told his story from beginning to end to Marzawan, who said, "In very sooth, I know her with whom thou didst foregather. Her name is the Princess Budur, and she is daughter to King Gahayur." Then he related to him all that had passed with the princess from first to last, and acquainted him with the excessive love she bore him, saying, "All that befell thee with thy father hath befallen her with hers, and thou art without doubt her beloved, even as she is thine. So brace up thy resolution and take heart, for I will bring thee to her, and unite you both anon, and deal with you even as saith the poet, albeit to lover adverse be his love, and show aversion howso may he care. Yet will I manage that their persons meet, e'en as the pivot of a scissors pair." And he ceased not to comfort and solace and encourage Kamar al-Zaman, and urged him to eat and drink, till he ate food and drank wine, and life returned to him, and he was saved from his ill case. And Marzawan cheered him and diverted him with talk and songs and stories, and in good time he became free of his disorder, and stood up, and sought to go to the Hammam. So Marzawan took him by the hand, and both went to the bath, where they washed their bodies and made them clean. And Scheherazade perceived the dawn of day, and ceased to say her permitted say. When it was the 200th night, she said, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that when Kamar al-Zaman, son of King Shahriman, went to the Hammam, his father in his joy at this event freed the prisoners, and presented splendid dresses to his grandees, and bestowed large alms gifts upon the poor, and bade decorate the city 7 days. Then quoth Marzawan to Kamar al-Zaman, Know, O my lord, that I came not from the Lady Budur save for this purpose, and the object of my journey was to deliver her from her present case. And it remaineth for us only to devise how we may get to her, since thy father cannot brook the thought of parting from thee. So it is my counsel that tomorrow thou ask his leave to go abroad hunting. Then do thou take with thee a pair of saddlebags full of money, and mount a swift steed, and lead a spare horse, and I will do the like, and say to thy sire, I have a mind to divert myself with hunting the desert, and to see the open country, and there to pass one night. Suffer not any servant to follow us, for as soon as we reach the open country, we will go our ways. Kamar al-Zaman rejoiced in this plan with great joy, and cried, It is good. Then he stiffened his back, and, going in to his father, sought his leave, and spoke as he had been taught. And the king consented to his going forth a-hunting, and said, O my son, blessed be the day that restoreth thee to health. I will not gainsay in this. But pass not more than 1 night in the desert, and return to me on the morrow, for thou knowest that life is not good to me without thee, and indeed I can hardly believe thee to be wholly recovered from what thou hadst, because thou art to me as he of whom quoth the poet, Albeit by me I had through day and night Solomon's carpet and the Chrysaorus might. Both were in value less than wing of gnat, unless these eyne could hold the eye in sight. Then the king equipped his son Kamar al-Zaman and Marzawan for the excursion, bidding make ready for them 4 horses, together with a dromedary to carry the money, and a camel to bear the water and belly timber. And Kamar al-Zaman forbade any of his attendants to follow him. His father farewelled him, and pressed him to his breast, and kissed him, saying, I ask thee in the name of Allah, be not absent from me more than 1 night, wherein sleep will be unlawful to me, for I am even as saith the poet, Thou present, in the heaven of heavens I dwell. Bearing thine absence is of hells my hell. Pledged be for thee my soul. If love for thee be crime, my crime is of the fellest fell. Does love low burn thy heart as burns it mine, doomed night, and day Gehenna fire to smell? Answered Kamar al-Zaman, O my father, Inshallah, I will lie abroad but 1 night. Then he took leave of him, and he and Marzawan mounted, and leading the spare horses, the dromedary with the money, and the camel with the water and victual, turned their faces towards the open country. And Scheherazade perceived the dawning day, and ceased saying her permitted say. When it was the 201st night, she said, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that Kamar al-Zaman and Marzawan fared forth, and turned their faces toward the open country. And they travelled from the first of the day till nightfall, when they halted, and ate and drank, and fed their beasts, and rested a while. After which they again took horse, and ceased not journeying for 3 days, and on the 4th they came to a spacious tract wherein was a thicket. They alighted in it, and Marzawan, taking the camel and one of the horses, slaughtered them, and cut off their flesh, and stripped their bones. Then he doffed from Kamar al-Zaman his shirt and trousers, which he smeared with the horse's blood, and he took the prince's coat, which he tore to shreds, and befouled with gore. And he cast them down in the fork of the road. Then they ate and drank, and mounting set forward again. And when Kamar al-Zaman asked why this was done, and said, "What is this, O my brother, and how shall it profit us?" Marzawan replied, "Know that thy father, when we have outstayed the second night, after the night from which we had his leave, and yet we return not, will mount and follow in our track till he come hither. And when he happeneth upon this blood which I have spilt, and he seeth thy shirt and trousers rent and gore fouled, he will fancy that some accident befell thee from bandits or wild beasts, and he will give up hope of thee and return to his city. And by this device we shall win our wishes." Quoth Kamar al-Zaman, "By Allah, this be indeed a rare device. Thou hast done right well." Then the two fared on days and nights, and all that while Kamar al-Zaman did naught but complain when he found himself alone, and he ceased not weeping till they drew near their journey's end, when he rejoiced and repeated these verses: "Wilt tyrant play with truest friend, who thinks of thee each hour, and after showing love desire betray indifference? May I forfeit every favor if in love I falsed thee. If thee I left, abandon me by way of recompense. But I've been guilty of no crime such harshness to deserve, and if I aught offended thee, I bring my penitence. Of fortune's wonders one it is thou hast abandoned me, but fortune never wearieth of showing wonderments." When he had made an end of his verses, Marzawan said to him, "Look, these be King Ghayur's islands." Whereat Kamar al-Zaman joyed with exceeding joy, and thanked him for what he had done, and kissed him between the eyes, and strained him—and Shahrazad perceived the dawn of day, and ceased saying her permitted say. When it was the 202nd night, she said, "It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that when Marzawan said, 'Look, these be the islands of King Ghayur,' Kamar al-Zaman joyed with exceeding joy, and thanked him for what he had done, and kissed him between the eyes, and strained him to his bosom. And after reaching the islands and entering the city, they took up their lodging in a khan, where they rested 3 days from the fatigues of their wayfare. After which Marzawan carried Kamar al-Zaman to the bath and, clothing him in merchant's gear, provided him with a geometric tablet of gold, with a set of astrological instruments, and with an astrolabe of silver plated with gold. Then he said to him, 'Arise, O my lord, and take thy stand under the walls of the king's palace, and cry out, I am the ready reckoner, I am the scrivener, I am he who weeteth the sought and the seeker, I am the finished man of science, I am the astrologer accomplished in experience. Where then is he that seeketh? As soon as the king heareth this, he will send after thee, and carry thee in to his daughter the Princess Budur, thy lover. But when about going in to her, do thou say to him, Grant me 3 days' delay, and if she recover, give her to me to wife, and if not, deal with me as thou dealest with those who forewent me. He will assuredly agree to this, so as soon as thou art alone with her, discover thyself to her, and when she seeth thee, she will recover strength, and her madness will cease from her, and she will be made whole in 1 night. Then do thou give her to eat and drink, and her father, rejoicing in her recovery, will marry thee to her and share his kingdom with thee, for he hath imposed on himself this condition, and so peace be upon thee." Now when Kamar al-Zaman heard these words, he exclaimed, "May I never lack thy benefits," and, taking the set of instruments foresaid, sallied forth from the caravanserai in the dress of his order. He walked on till he stood under the walls of King Ghayur's palace, where he began to cry out, saying, I am the scribe, I am the ready reckoner, I am he who knoweth the sought and the seeker, I am he who openeth the volume and summeth up the sums, who dreams can expound whereby the sought is found. Where then is the seeker? Now when the city people heard this, they flocked to him, for it was long since they had seen scribe or astrologer. And they stood round him, and, looking upon him, they saw one in the prime of beauty and grace and perfect elegance, and they marveled at his loveliness, and his fine stature and symmetry. Presently one of them accosted him and said, Allah upon thee, O thou fair and young, with the eloquent tongue, incur not this affray, nor throw thy life away in thine ambition to marry the Princess Budur. Only cast thine eyes upon yonder heads hung up. All their owners have lost their lives in this same venture. Yet Kamar al-Zaman paid no heed to them, but cried out at the top of his voice, saying, I am the doctor, the scrivener, I am the astrologer, the calculator. And all the townsfolk forbade him from this, but he regarded them not at all, saying in his mind, None knoweth desire, save whoso suffereth it. Then he began again to cry his loudest, shouting, I am the scrivener, I am the astrologer. And Scheherazade perceived the dawn of day, and ceased to say her permitted say. End of section 31 of the Book of 1000 Nights and a Night, Volume 3.
Section 32, Volume 3 of the Book of 1000 Nights and a Night, translated by Richard Burton. This is a Librivox recording. All Librivox recordings are in the public domain. For more information, or to volunteer, please visit Librivox.org. Recording by Catherine. The Book of 1000 Nights and a Night, Volume 3, Section 32. When it was the 203rd night, she said, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that Kamar al-Zaman in no wise heeded the words of the citizens, but continued to cry out, I am the calculator, I am the astrologer. Thereupon all the townsfolk were wroth with him, and said to him, Thou art nothing but an imbecile, silly, self-willed lad. Have pity on thine own youth, and tender years, and beauty, and loveliness. But he cried all the more, I am the astrologer, I am the calculator. Is there any one that seeketh? As he was thus crying, and the people forbidding him, behold, King Ghayur heard his voice, and the clamour of the lieges, and said to his wazir, Go down and bring me yon astrologer. So the wazir went down in haste, and, taking Kamar al-Zaman from the midst of the crowd, led him up to the king, and when in the presence, he kissed the ground and began versifying, 8 glories meet, all conjoined in thee, whereby may fortune I thy servant be. Lair, lordliness, grace, generosity, plain words, deep meaning, honor, victory. When the king looked upon him, he seated him by his side, and said to him, By Allah, my son, an thou be not an astrologer, venture not thy life, nor comply with my condition. For I have bound myself, that whoso goeth in to my daughter, and healeth her not of that which hath befallen her, I will strike off his head. But whoso healeth her, him I will marry to her. So let not thy beauty and loveliness delude thee. For by Allah, and again by Allah, if thou cure her not, I will assuredly cut off thy head. And Kamar al-Zaman replied, This is thy right, and I consent, for I wot of this ere came I hither. Then King Ghayur took the Qazis to witness against him, and delivered him to the eunuch, saying, Carry this one to the Lady Budur. So the eunuch took him by the hand, and led him along the passage. But Kamar al-Zaman outstripped him, and pushed on before, whilst the eunuch ran after him, saying, Woe to thee! Hasten not to thine own ruin. Never yet saw I astrologer so eager for his proper destruction, but thou weetest not what calamities are before thee. Thereupon Kamar al-Zaman turned away his face, from the eunuch. And Shahrazed perceived the dawn of day, and ceased saying her permitted say. When it was the 204th night, she said, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that when the eunuch thus addressed Kamar al-Zaman, Patience, and no indecent hurry, the prince turned away his face, and began repeating these couplets. A sage, I feel a fool before thy charms. Distraught, I wot not what the words I say. If I say sun, away thou dost not pass from eyes of me, while suns go down with day. Thou hast completed beauty, in whose praise speech makers fail, and talkers lose their way. Then the eunuch stationed Kamar al-Zaman behind the curtain of the princess's door, and the prince said to him, Which of the two ways will please thee more? Treat and cure thy lady from here, or go in and heal her within the curtain? The eunuch marvelled at his words and answered, An thou heal her from here, it were better proof of thy skill. Upon this, Kamar al-Zaman sat down behind the curtain, and, taking out ink case, pen, and paper, wrote the following. This is the writ of one whom passion swayeth, and whom longing waylayeth, and wakeful misery slayeth, one who despaireth of living, and looketh for naught but dying, with whose mourning heart nor comforter nor helper taketh part, one whose sleepless eyes none succoureth from anxieties, whose day is passed in fire, and his night in torturing desire, whose body is wasted for much emaciation, and no messenger from his beloved bringeth him consolation. And after this he indited the following couplets. I write with heart devoted to thy thought, and eyelids chafed by tears of blood they bled, and body clad by loving pine and pain in shirt of leanness and worn down to thread. To thee complain I of love's tormentry, which ousted hapless patience from her stead. À toi, show favour and some mercy deign, for passion's cruel hands my vitals shred. And beneath his lines he wrote these cadenced sentences. The heart's pain is removed by union with the beloved, and whomso his lover paineth, only Allah assaineth. If we or you have wrought deceit, may the deceiver win defeat. There is naught goodlier than a lover who keeps faith with the beloved who works him scathe. Then, by way of subscription, he wrote, From the distracted and despairing man, whom love and longing trepan, from the lover under passion's ban, the prisoner of transport and distraction, from this Kamar al-Zaman, son of Shahriman, to the peerless one, of the fair Auris the pearl union, to the lady Budur, daughter of King al-Ghayur. Know thou that by night I am sleepless, and by day in distress, consumed with increasing wasting and pain, and longing and love unfeigned, abounding in sighs, with tear-flooded eyes, by passion captive ta'en, of desire the slain, with heart seared by the parting of us twain, the debtor of longing bane, of sickness cup companion. I am the sleepless one, who never closeth eye, the slave of love, whose tears run never dry, for the fire of my heart is still burning, and never hidden is the flame of my yearning. Then on the margin, Kamar al-Zaman wrote this admired verse. Salem from graces, hoarded by my Lord, to her who holds my heart and soul in hoard. And also these. Pray ye grant me some words from your lips, belike such mercy may comfort and cool these eyne. From the stress of my love and my pine for you, I make light of what makes me despised in thine. Allah, guard of folk whose abode was far, and whose secret I kept in the holiest shrine. Now fortune in kindness hath favoured me, thrown on the threshold dust of this love of mine. By me bedded I looked on Budur, whose sun the moon of my fortunes hath made to shine. Then, having affixed his seal ring to the missive, he wrote these couplets in the place of address. Ask of my writ what wrote my pen in dole, and hear my tale of misery from this scroll. My hand is writing while my tears down flow, and to the paper plains my longing soul. My tears cease not to roll upon this sheet, and if they stopped, I'd cause blood gouts to roll. And at the end he added this other verse: I've sent the ring off from thy finger bore. Ay, when we met, now deign my ring restore. Then Kamar al-Zaman set the Lady Budur's ring inside the letter and sealed it and gave it to the eunuch, who took it and went in with it to his mistress. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of day and ceased to say her permitted say. When it was the 205th night, she said, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that Kamar al-Zaman, after setting the seal ring inside the epistle, gave it to the eunuch, who took it and went in with it to his mistress. And, when the Lady Budur opened it, she found therein her own very ring. Then she read the paper, and when she understood its purport, and knew that it was from her beloved, and that he in person stood behind the curtain, her reason began to fly, and her breast swelled for joy and rose high, and she repeated these couplets: Long, long have I bewailed the severance of our loves, with tears that from my lids streamed down like burning rain, and vowed that, if the days deign reunite us two, my lips should never speak of severance again. Joy hath o'erwhelmed me so, that for the very stress of that which gladdens me to weeping, I am fain. Tears are become to you a habit, O my eyes, so that ye weep as well for gladness as for pain. And having finished her verse, the Lady Budur stood up forthwith, and, firmly setting her feet to the wall, strained with all her might upon the collar of iron, till she brake it from her neck, and snapped the chains. Then going forth from behind the curtain, she threw herself on Kamar al-Zaman, and kissed him on the mouth, like a pigeon feeding its young. And she embraced him with all the stress of her love and longing, and said to him, O my lord, do I wake or sleep, and hath the Almighty indeed vouchsafe us reunion after disunion? Laud be to Allah, who hath our loves repaired, even after we despaired. Now when the eunuch saw her in this case, he went off running to King Ghayur, and, kissing the ground before him, said, O my lord, know that this astrologer is indeed the sheikh of all astrologers, who are fools to him, all of them. For verily he hath cured thy daughter while standing behind the curtain, and without going in to her. Quoth the king, Look well to it. Is this news true? Answered the eunuch, O my lord, rise and come and see for thyself how she hath found strength to break the iron chains, and is come forth to the astrologer, kissing and embracing him. Thereupon the king arose and went in to his daughter, who, when she saw him, stood up in haste and covered her head, and recited these two couplets: The toothstick love I not, for when I say Siwak, I miss thee, for it sounds Siwaka. The caper tree I love, for when I say Arak, it sounds I look on thee, Araka. Thereupon the king was so transported for joy at her recovery that he felt like to fly, and kissed her between the eyes, for he loved her with dearest love. Then, turning to Kamar al-Zaman, he asked him who he was, and said, What countryman art thou? So the prince told him his name and rank, and informed him that he was the son of King Shahriman, and pleasantly related to him the whole story from beginning to end, and acquainted him with what happened between himself and the Lady Budur, and how he had taken her seal ring from her finger, and had placed it on his own. Whereat Ghayur marvelled, and said, Verily, your story deserveth in books to be chronicled, and when you are dead and gone, age after age to be read. Then he summoned qazis and witnesses forthright, and married the Lady Budur to Prince Kamar al-Zaman, after which he bade decorate the city 7 days long. So they spread the tables with all manner of meats, whilst the drums beat and the criers announced the glad tidings, and all the troops donned their richest clothes, and they illuminated the city and held high festival. Then Kamar al-Zaman went in to the Lady Budur, and the king rejoiced in her recovery and in her marriage, and praised Allah for that he had made her to fall in love with a goodly youth of the sons of kings. So they unveiled her and displayed the bride before the bridegroom, and both were the living likeness of each other in beauty and comeliness and grace and love allurement. Then Kamar al-Zaman lay with her that night and took his will of her, while she in like manner fulfilled her desire of him and enjoyed his charms and grace, and they slept in each other's arms till the morning. On the morrow the king made a wedding feast, to which he gathered all comers from the islands of the inner and outer seas, and he spread the tables with choicest viands, nor ceased the banqueting for a whole month. Now when Kamar al-Zaman had thus fulfilled his will and attained his inmost desire, and whenas he had tarried a while with the Princess Budur, he bethought him of his father, King Shahriman, and saw him in a dream, saying, O my son, is it thus thou dealest with me? And recited in the vision these 2 couplets. Indeed, to watch the darkness moon he blighted me, and to stargaze through longsome night he plighted me. Easy, my heart, for haply he'll unite with thee, and patience, sprite, with whatso ills he dight to thee. Now, after seeing his father in the dream, and hearing his reproaches, Kamar al-Zaman woke in the morning, afflicted and troubled, whereupon the Lady Budur questioned him, and he told her what he had seen. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of day, and ceased saying her permitted say. When it was the 206th night, she said, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that when Kamar al-Zaman acquainted the Lady Budur with what he had seen in his dream, she and he went in to her sire, and, telling him what had passed, besought his leave to travel. He gave the prince the permission he sought, but the princess said, O my father, I cannot bear to be parted from him. Quoth the Ghayur, her sire, Then go thou with him, and gave her leave to be absent a whole 12-month, and afterwards to visit him in every year once. So she kissed his hand, and Kamar al-Zaman did the like. Thereupon King Ghayur proceeded to equip his daughter and her bridegroom for the journey, and furnished them with outfit and appointments for the march, and brought out of his stables horses marked with his own brand, blood dromedaries which can journey 10 days without water, and prepared a litter for his daughter, besides loading mules and camels with victual. Moreover, he gave them slaves and eunuchs to serve them and all manner of travelling gear. And on the day of departure, when King Ghayur took leave of Kamar al-Zaman, he bestowed on him 10 splendid suits of cloth of gold embroidered with stones of price, together with 10 riding horses and 10 she-camels, and a treasury of money. And he charged him to love and cherish his daughter, the Lady Budur. Then the king accompanied them to the farthest limits of his islands, where, going in to his daughter Budur in the litter, he kissed her and strained her to his bosom, weeping and repeating, O thou who wooest severance, easy fare, for love embrace belongs to lover-friend. Fare softly, fortune's nature falsehood is, and parting shall love's every meeting end. Then, leaving his daughter, he went to her husband and bade him farewell and kissed him, after which he parted from them and, giving the order for the march, he returned to his capital with the troops. The prince and princess and their suite fared on without stopping through the first day and the second, and the third and the fourth, nor did they cease faring for a whole month till they came to a spacious champaign, abounding in pasturage, where they pitched their tents, and they ate and drank and rested, and the Princess Budur lay down to sleep. Presently Kamar al-Zaman went in to her, and found her lying asleep, clad in a shift of apricot-coloured silk that showed all and everything, and on her head was a coif of gold cloth embroidered with pearls and jewels. The breeze raised her shift, which laid bare her navel and showed her breasts, and displayed a stomach whiter than snow, each one of whose dimples would contain an ounce of benzoin ointment. At this sight his love and longing redoubled, and he began repeating, "On were it asked me when by hellfire burnt, when flames of heart my vitals hold and hem, which wouldst thou chose? Say, wouldst thou rather them, or drink sweet cooling draught? I'd answer, them." Then he put his hand to the band of her petticoat trousers, and drew it and loosed it, for his soul lusted after her, when he saw a jewel, red as dyewood, made fast to the band. He untied it and examined it, and, seeing 2 lines of writing graven thereon, in a character not to be read, marvelled, and said in his mind, "Were not this bezel something to her very dear, she had not bound it to her trousers band, nor hidden it in the most privy and precious place about her person, that she might not be parted from it. Would I knew what she cloth with this, and what is the secret that is in it." So saying, he took it, and went outside the tent to look at it in the light. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of day, and ceased to say her permitted say. End of section 32 of The Book of 1000 Nights and a Night, Volume 3. Recording by Catherine, Hong Kong, March 2010.
Section 33, Volume 3 of The Book of 1000 Nights and a Night, translated by Richard Burton. This is a Librivox recording. All Librivox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Book of 1000 Nights and a Night, Volume 3, Section 33. When it was the 207th night, she said, "It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that when he took the bezel to look at it in the light, the while he was holding it, behold, a bird swooped down on him, and snatching the same from his hand, flew off with it, and then lighted on the ground. Thereupon Kamar al-Zaman, fearing to lose the jewel, ran after the bird. But it flew on before him, keeping just out of his reach, and ceased not to draw him on from dale to dale and from hill to hill, till the night darkened and the firmament darkened, when it roosted on a high tree. So Kamar al-Zaman stopped under the tree, confounded in thought, and faint for famine and fatigue, and giving himself up for lost, would have turned back, but knew not the way whereby he came, for that darkness had overtaken him. Then he exclaimed, "There is no majesty, and there is no might save in Allah, the Glorious, the Great," and laying him down under the tree whereon was the bird, slept till the morning, when he awoke and saw the bird also wake up and fly away. He arose and walked after it, and it flew on little by little before him, after the measure of his faring. At which he smiled and said, "By Allah, a strange thing! Yesterday this bird flew before me as fast as I could run, and today, knowing that I have awoke tired and cannot run, he flieth after the measure of my faring. By Allah, this is wonderful! But I must needs follow this bird whether it lead me to death or to life, and I will go wherever it goeth, for at all events it will not abide save in some inhabited land." So he continued to follow the bird, which roosted every night upon a tree. And he ceased not pursuing it for a space of 10 days, feeding on the fruits of the earth and drinking of its waters. At the end of this time he came in sight of an inhabited city, whereupon the bird darted off like the glance of the eye, and entering the town, disappeared from Kamar al-Zaman, who knew not what it meant or whither it was gone. So he marvelled at this and exclaimed, "Praise be to Allah, who hath brought me in safety to this city." Then he sat down by a stream and washed his hands and feet and face, and rested awhile. And recalling his late easy and pleasant life of union with his beloved, and contrasting it with his present plight of trouble and fatigue and distress, and strangerhood and famine and severance, the tears streamed from his eyes, and he began repeating these cinquains: "Fain had I hid thy handwork, but it showed; changed sleep for wake, and wake with me abode. When thou didst spurn my heart, I cried aloud, Fate, hold thy hand, and cease to gird and goad. In dole and danger my sprite I spy. And but the Lord of Love were just to me, sleep from my eyelids ne'er were forced to flee. Pity, my lady, one for love o' thee, from his tribe's darling, brought to low degree. Love came, and doomed wealth, beggar death to die. The railers chide at thee, I ne'er gainsay, but stop my ears and dumbly sign them nay. Thou lov'st a slender May, say they. I say, I've picked her out and cast the rest away. Enough, when fate descends, she blinds man's eye." And as soon as he had finished his poetry and had taken his rest, he rose and walked on little by little till he entered the city. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of day and ceased saying her permitted say. Now when it was the 208th Night, she said, It hath reached me, O auspicious King, that as soon as Kamar al-Zaman had finished his poetry and had taken his rest, he arose and entered the city gate, not knowing whither he should wend. He crossed the city from end to end, entering by the land gate, and ceased not faring on till he came out at the sea gate, for the city stood on the seashore. Yet he met not a single one of its citizens. And after issuing from the land gate he fared forwards, and ceased not faring till he found himself among the orchards and gardens of the place, and passing among the trees, presently came to a garden, and he stopped before its door, whereupon the keeper came out to him and saluted him. The Prince returned his greeting, and the gardener bade him welcome, saying, "Praised be Allah that thou hast come off safe from the dwellers of this city. Quick, come into the garth ere any of the town folk see thee." Thereupon Kamar al-Zaman entered that garden, wondering in mind, and asked the keeper, "What may be the history of the people of this city, and who may they be?" The other answered, "Know that the people of this city are all Magians, but Allah upon thee! Tell me how thou camest to this city, and what caused thy coming to our capital." Accordingly Kamar al-Zaman told the gardener all that had befallen him from beginning to end, whereat he marvelled with great marvel and said, "Know, O my son, that the cities of Al-Islam lie far from us, and between us and them is a 4 months' voyage by sea and a whole 12 months' journey by land. We have a ship which saileth every year with merchandise to the nearest Moslem country, and which entereth the seas of the Ebony Islands, and thence maketh the Khalidan Islands, the dominions of King Shahriman." Thereupon Kamar al-Zaman considered awhile, and concluded that he could not do better than abide in the garden with the gardener and become his assistant, receiving for pay 1/4 of the produce. So he said to him, Wilt thou take me into thy service, to help thee in this garden? Answered the gardener, To hear is to consent, and began teaching him to lead the water to the roots of the trees. So Kamar al-Zaman abode with him, watering the trees and hoeing up the weeds, and wearing a short blue frock which reached to his knees. And he wept floods of tears, for he had no rest day or night by reason of his strangerhood, and he ceased not to repeat verses upon his beloved, amongst others the following couplets: Ye promised us, and will ye not keep plight? Ye said a say, and shall not deed be dight? We wake for passion while ye slumber and sleep. Watchers and wakers claim not equal right. We vowed to keep our loves in secrecy, but spake the meddler, and you spoke forthright. O friend in pain and pleasure, joy and grief, in all case you only claim my sprite. Mid folk is one who holds my prisoned heart. Would he but show some ruth for me to sight. Not every eye like mine is wounded sore, not every heart like mine love pinings blight. Ye wronged me, saying love is wrongous, aye, yea, ye were right, events have proved that quite. Forget they one love thralled, whose faith the world robs not, though burn the fires in heart alight. If an mine foeman shall become my judge, whom shall I sue to remedy his despite? Had not I need of love, nor love had sought, my heart for sure were not thus love distraught. Such was the case with Kamar al-Zaman, but as regards his wife, the Lady Budur, when she awoke, she sought her husband and found him not. Then she saw her petticoat trousers undone, for the band had been loosed and the bezel lost, whereupon she said to herself, By Allah, this is strange! Where is my husband? It would seem as if he had taken the talisman and gone away, knowing not the secret which is in it. Would to heaven I knew whither can he have wended! But it must needs have been some extraordinary matter that drew him away, for he cannot brook to leave me a moment. Allah curse the stone, and damn its hour. Then she considered a while and said in her mind, If I go out and tell the varlets, and let them learn that my husband is lost, they will lust after me. There is no help for it but that I use stratagem. So she rose and donned some of her husband's clothes and riding boots, and a turband like his, drawing one corner of it across her face for a mouth veil. Then, setting a slave girl in her litter, she went forth from the tent and called to the pages who brought her Kamar al-Zaman's steed. And she mounted and bade them load the beasts and resume the march. So they bound on the burdens and departed. And she concealed her trick, none doubting but she was Kamar al-Zaman, for she favoured him in face and form. Nor did she cease journeying, she and her suite, days and nights, till they came in sight of a city overlooking the salt sea, where they pitched their tents without the walls and halted to rest. The princess asked the name of the town, and was told, It is called the City of Ebony. Its king is named Armanuz, and he hath a daughter Hayat al-Nufus hight. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of day and ceased saying her permitted say. Now when it was the 209th night, she said, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that when the Lady Budur halted within sight of the Ebony City to take her rest, King Armanus sent a messenger to learn what king it was who had encamped without his capital. So the messenger, coming to the tents, made inquiry anent their king, and was told that she was a king's son who had lost the way, being bound for the Khalidan Islands. Whereupon he returned to King Armanus with the tidings, and when the king heard them, he straightway rode out with the lords of his land to greet the stranger on arrival. As he drew near the tents, the Lady Budur came to meet him on foot, whereupon the king alighted, and they saluted each other. Then he took her to the city, and bringing her up to the palace, bade them spread the tables and trays of food, and commanded them to transport her company and baggage to the guest house. So they abode there 3 days, at the end of which time the king came in to the Lady Budur. Now she had that day gone to the Hammam, and her face shone as the moon at its full, a seduction to the world, and a rending of the veil of shame to mankind. And Armanus found her clad in a suit of silk, embroidered with gold and jewels. So he said to her, "O my son, know that I am a very old man, decrepit withal, and Allah hath blessed me with no child save one daughter, who resembleth thee in beauty and grace. And I am now waxed unfit for the conduct of the state. She is thine, O my son, and if this my land please thee, and thou be willing to abide and make thy home here, I will marry thee to her, and give thee my kingdom, and so be at rest." When Princess Budur heard this, she bowed her head, and her forehead sweated for shame, and she said to herself, "How shall I do, and I a woman? If I refuse and depart from him, I cannot be safe, but that haply he send after me troops to slay me. And if I consent, belike I shall be put to shame. I have lost my beloved Kamar al Zaman, and know not what is become of him. Nor can I escape from this scrape save by holding my peace, and consenting and abiding here till Allah bring about what is to be." So she raised her head and made submission to King Armanus, saying, "Hearkening and obedience." Whereat he rejoiced and bade the herald make proclamation throughout the Ebony Islands to hold high festival and decorate the houses. Then he assembled his chamberlains and nabobs and emirs and wazirs and his officers of state and the qazis of the city, and formally abdicating his sultanate, endowed Budur therewith, and invested her in all the vestments of royalty. The emirs and grandees went in to her and did her homage, nothing doubting but that she was a young man, and all who looked on her bepissed their bag trousers for the excess of her beauty and loveliness. Then, after the Lady Budur had been made sultan, and the drums had been beaten in announcement of the glad event, and she had been ceremoniously enthroned, King Armanus proceeded to equip his daughter Hayat al-Nufus for marriage, and in a few days they brought the Lady Budur in to her, when they seemed as it were 2 moons risen at one time, or 2 suns in conjunction. So they entered the bridal chamber, and the doors were shut, and the curtains let down upon them after the attendants had lighted the wax candles and spread for them the carpet bed. When Budur found herself alone with the Princess Hayat al-Nufus, she called to mind her beloved Kamar al-Zaman, and grief was sore upon her. So she wept for his absence and estrangement, and she began repeating, "O ye who fled and left my heart in pain low li'en, no breath of life is found within this frame of mine. I have an eye which e'er complains of wake, but lo! tears occupy it, would that wake content these eyne. After ye marched forth the lover bode behind, question of him what pains your absence could design. But for the floods of tears mine eyelids rail and rain, my fires would flame on high, and every land calcine. To Allah make I moan of loved ones lost for aye, who for my pine and pain no more shall pain and pine. I never wronged them, save that over love I nursed, but love departs us lovers into blest and cursed. And when she had finished her repeating, the Lady Budur sat down beside the Princess Hayat al-Nufus and kissed her on the mouth, after which, rising abruptly, she made the minor ablution and betook herself to her devotion. Nor did she leave praying till Hayat al-Nufus fell asleep, when she slipped into bed and lay with her back to her till morning. And when day had broken, the king and queen came in to their daughter and asked her how she did, whereupon she told them what she had seen and repeated to them the verses she had heard. Thus far concerning Hayat al-Nufus and her father, but as regards Queen Budur, she went forth and seated herself upon the royal throne, and all the emirs and captains and officers of state came up to her and wished her joy of the kingship, kissing earth before her and calling down blessings upon her. And she accosted them with smiling face and clad them in robes of honour, augmenting the fiefs of the high officials and giving largesse to the levies. Wherefore all the people loved her and offered up prayers for the long endurance of her reign, doubting not but that she was a man. And she ceased not sitting all day in the hall of audience, bidding and forbidding, dispensing justice, releasing prisoners and remitting the customs dues, till nightfall, when she withdrew to the apartment prepared for her. Here she found Hayat al-Nufus seated, so she sat down by her side and, clapping her on the back, coaxed and caressed her and kissed her between the eyes, and fell to versifying in these couplets: What secret kept I these my tears have told, and my waste body must my love unfold, though hid my pine, my plight on parting day, to every envious eye my secret sold. O ye who broke up camp, you've left behind my spirit wearied and my heart a-cold. In my heart's core ye dwell, and now these eyne roll blood drops with the tears they whilome rolled. The absent will I ransom with my soul, all can my yearning for their sight behold. I have an eye whose babe, for love of thee, rejected sleep, nor hath its tears controlled. The foeman bids me patient bear his loss, ne'er may mine ears accept the ruth he doled. I tricked their deme of me, and won my wish of Kamar al Zaman's joys manifold. He joins all perfect gifts, like none before, boasted such might and main no king of old. Seeing his gifts, Bin Za'ida's largesse forget we, and Mu'aywa mildest souled. Were verse not feeble and o'ershort the time, I had in laud of him used all of rhyme. Then Queen Budur stood up and wiped away her tears, and making the lesser ablution, applied her to pray. Nor did she give over praying till drowsiness overcame the Lady Hayat al-Nufus and she slept, whereupon the Lady Budur came and lay by her till the morning. At daybreak she arose and prayed the dawn prayer, and presently seated herself on the royal throne and passed the day in ordering and counter-ordering, and giving laws and administering justice. This is how it fared with her. But as regards King Armanus, he went in to his daughter and asked her how she did. So she told him all that had befallen her, and repeated to him the verses which Queen Budur had recited, adding, "O my father, never saw I one more abounding in sound sense and modesty than my husband, save that he doth nothing but weep and sigh." He answered, "O my daughter, have patience with him yet this third night, and if he go not in unto thee and do away thy maidenhead, we shall know how to proceed with him, and oust him from the throne and banish him the country." And on this wise he agreed with his daughter what course he would take. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of day and ceased saying her permitted say. End of section 33.
Section 34, Volume 3 of the Book of 1,000 Nights and a Night, translated by Richard Burton. This is a Librivox recording. All Librivox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit librivox.org. Recording by Leonard Wilson. The Book of 1,000 Nights and a Night, Volume 3, Section 34. When it was the 210th night, she said, "It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that when King Armanus had agreed with his daughter on this wise, and had determined what course he would take, and night came on, Queen Budur arose from the throne of her kingdom, and betaking herself to the palace, entered the apartment prepared for her. There she found the wax candles lighted, and the Princess Hayat al-Nufus seated and awaiting her. Whereupon she bethought her of her husband, and what had betided them, both of sorrow and severance, in so short a space. She wept and sighed, and groaned groan upon groan, and began improvising these couplets. News of my love fill all the land, I swear, as suns on Gaza wold rain heat and glare. Speaketh his jest, but hard its sense to say, thus never cease to grow my cark and care. I hate fair patience, since I loved thee. E'er sawest lover hate for love to bear? A glance that dealt love sickness dealt me death. Glances are deadliest things with torments rare. He shook his love locks down and bared his chin, whereby I spied his beauties dark and fair. My care, my cure are in his hands, and he who caused their dolour can their dole repair. His belt went daft for softness of his waist, his hips for envy to uprise forbear. His brow curl diademed is murky night. Unveil it, and lo, bright morn shows brightest light. When she had finished her versifying, she would have risen to pray, but lo and behold, Hayat al-Nufus caught her by the skirt and clung to her, saying, O my lord, art thou not ashamed before my father, after all his favour, to neglect me at such a time as this? When Queen Budur heard her words, she sat down in the same place and said, O my beloved, what is this thou sayest? She replied, What I say is that I never saw any so proud of himself as thou. Is every fair one so disdainful? I say not this to incline thee to me. I say it only of my fear for thee from King Armanus, because he purposeth, unless thou go in unto me this very night, and do away my maidenhead, to strip thee of the kingship on the morrow, and banish thee his kingdom. And peradventure his excessive anger may lead him to slay thee. But I, O my lord, have ruth on thee, and give thee fair warning, and it is thy right to wreck." Now when Queen Budur heard her speak these words, she bowed her head groundwards a while in sore perplexity, and said in herself, "If I refuse, I'm lost, and if I obey, I'm shamed. But I am now queen of all the Ebony Islands, and they are under my rule, nor shall I ever again meet my Kamar al-Zaman, save in this place, for there is no way for him to his native land but through the Ebony Islands. Verily, I know not what to do in my present case, but I commit my care to Allah, who directeth all for the best, for I am no man that I should arise and open this virgin girl." Then quoth Queen Budur to Hayat al-Nufus, "O my beloved, that I have neglected thee and abstained from thee is in my own despite." And she told her her whole story from beginning to end, and showed her person to her, saying, "I conjure thee by Allah to keep my counsel, for I have concealed my case only that Allah may reunite me with my beloved Kamar al-Zaman, and then come what may." And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of day, and ceased to say her permitted say. When it was the 211th Night, she said, It hath reached me, O auspicious King, that when the Lady Budur acquainted Hayat al-Nufus with her history and bade her keep it secret, the Princess heard her with extreme wonderment and was moved to pity, and prayed Allah to reunite her with her beloved, saying, "Fear nothing, O my sister, but have patience till Allah bring to pass that which must come to pass." And she began repeating, "None but the men of worth a secret keep, with worthy men a secret's hidden deep, as in a room, so secrets lie with me, whose door is sealed, lock shot, and lost the key." And when Hayat al-Nufus had ended her verses, she said, "O my sister, verily the breasts of the noble and brave are of secrets the grave, and I will not discover thine." Then they toyed and embraced and kissed, and slept till near the muezzin's call to dawn prayer, when Hayat al-Nufus arose and took a pigeon poult and cut its throat over her smock and besmeared herself with its blood. Then she pulled off her petticoat trousers and cried aloud, whereupon her people hastened to her and raised the usual lullilooing and outcries of joy and gladness. Presently her mother came in to her and asked her how she did, and busied herself about her, and abode with her till evening, whilst the Lady Budur arose with the dawn and repaired to the bath, and after washing herself pure, proceeded to the hall of audience, where she sat down on her throne and dispensed justice among the folk. Now when King Armanus heard the loud cries of joy, he asked what was the matter, and was informed of the consummation of his daughter's marriage, whereat he rejoiced and his breast swelled with gladness, and he made a great marriage feast, whereof the merrymaking lasted a long time. Such was their case, but as regards King Shahriman, it was on this wise. After his son had fared forth to the chase, accompanied by Marzawan, as before related, he tarried, patiently awaiting their return at nightfall. But when his son did not appear, he passed a sleepless night, and the dark hours were longsome upon him. His restlessness was excessive, his excitement grew upon him, and he thought the morning would never dawn. But when day broke, he sat expecting his son, and waited till noon, but he came not, whereat his heart forebode separation, and was fired with fears for Kamar al-Zaman, and he cried, "Alas, my son!" And he wept till his clothes were drenched with tears, and repeated with a beating heart, Love's votaries I ceased not to oppose, till doomed to taste love's bitter and love's sweet, I drained his rigour cup to very dregs, self-humbled at its slaves' and freemen's feet. Fortune had sworn to part the loves of us, she kept her word how truly, well I weet. And when he ended his verse, he wiped away his tears, and bade his troops make ready for a march, and prepare for a long expedition. So they all mounted and set forth, headed by the Sultan, whose heart burnt with grief, and was fired with anxiety for his son, Kamar al-Zaman. And they advanced by forced marches. Now the king divided his host into 6 divisions, a right wing and a left wing, a vanguard and a rear guard, and bade them rendezvous for the morrow at the crossroads. Accordingly they separated and scoured the country all the rest of that day till night, and they marched through the night. And at noon of the ensuing day they joined company at the place where 4 roads met. But they knew not which the prince followed, till they saw the sign of torn clothes, and sighted shreds of flesh, and beheld blood still sprinkled by the way, and they noted every piece of the clothes and fragment of mangled flesh scattered on all sides. Now when King Shahriman saw this, he cried from his heart core a loud cry, saying, "Alas, my son!" and buffeted his face, and plucked his beard, and rent his raiment, doubting not but his son was dead. Then he gave himself up to excessive weeping and wailing, and the troops also wept for his weeping, all being assured that Prince Kamar al-Zaman had perished. They threw dust on their heads, and the night surprised them shedding tears and lamenting till they were like to die. Then the king, with a heart on fire and with burning sighs, spoke these couplets: "Chide not the mourner for bemourning woe, enough is yearning every ill to show. He weeps for stress of sorrow and of pain, and these to thee best evidence his low. Happy of whom love sickness swore that ne'er should cease his eyelids loving tears to flow. He mourns the loss of fairest, fullest moon, shining o'er all his peers in glorious glow. But death made drink a brimming cup, what day he fared from natal country fain to go. His home left he, and went from us to grief, nor to his brethren could he say adieu. Yea, his loss wounded me with parting pangs, and separation cost me many a throe. He fared, farewelling as he fared our eyes, when as his Lord vouchsafed him paradise." And when King Shahriman had ended his verses, he returned with the troops to his capital. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of day, and ceased saying her permitted say. When it was the 212th night, she said, "It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that when King Shahriman had ended his verses, he returned with the troops to his capital, giving up his son for lost, and deeming that wild beasts of banditti had set upon him and torn him to pieces, and made proclamation that all in the Khalidan Islands should don black in mourning for him. Moreover, he built in his memory a pavilion, naming it House of Lamentations, and on Mondays and Thursdays he devoted himself to the business of the state, and ordering the affairs of his levies and lieges, and the rest of the week he was wont to spend in the House of Lamentations, mourning for his son and bewailing him with elegiac verses, of which the following are some. My day of bliss is that when thou appearest, my day of bale is that whereon thou farest. Though through the night I quake in dread of death, union with thee is of all bliss the dearest. And again he said, My soul be sacrifice for one whose going afflicted hearts with sufferings sore and dread. Let joy her widowed term fulfill, for I divorced joy with the divorce thrice said. Such was the case with King Shahriman. But as regards Queen Budur, daughter of King Ghayur, she abode as ruler in the Ebony Islands, whilst the folk would point to her with their fingers and say, Yonder is the son-in-law of King Armanus. And every night she lay with Hayat al-Nufus, to whom she lamented her desolate state, and longing for her husband Kamar al-Zaman, weeping and describing to her his beauty and loveliness, and yearning to enjoy him, though but in a dream. And at times she would repeat, Well Allah wots that since my severance from thee, I wept till forced to borrow tears at usury. Patience, my blamer cried, heart's ease right soon shalt see. Quoth I, Say, blamer, where may home of patience be? This is how it fared with Queen Budur. But as regards Kamar al-Zaman, he abode with the gardener in the garden for no short time, weeping night and day, and repeating verses bewailing the past time of enjoyment and delight, whilst the gardener kept comforting him and assuring him that the ship would set sail for the land of the Moslems at the end of the year. And in this condition he continued, till one day he saw the folk crowding together and wondered at this. But the gardener came into him and said, O my son, give over work for this day, nor lead water to the trees, for it is a festival day, whereon folk visit one another. So take thy rest, and only keep thine eye on the garden, whilst I go look after the ship for thee, for yet but a little while, and I send thee to the land of the Moslems. Upon this he went forth from the garden, leaving to himself Kamar al-Zaman, who fell to music upon his case, till his heart was like to break, and the tears streamed from his eyes. So he wept with excessive weeping till he swooned away. And when he recovered, he rose and walked about the garden, pondering what time had done with him, and bewailing the long endurance of his estrangement and separation from those he loved. As he was thus absorbed in melancholy thought, his foot stumbled, and he fell on his face, his forehead striking against the projecting root of a tree. And the blow cut it open, and his blood ran down and mingled with his tears. Then he rose, and wiping away the blood, dried his tears, and bound his brow with a piece of rag, then continued his walk about the garden, engrossed by sad reverie. Presently he looked up at a tree, and saw two birds quarrelling thereon. And one of them rose up and smote the other with its beak on the neck, and severed from its body its head, wherewith it flew away, whilst the slain bird fell to the ground before Kamar al-Zaman. As it lay, behold, two great birds swooped down upon it, alighting, one at the head and the other at the tail, and both drooped their wings and bowed their bills over it, and extending their necks towards it, wept. Kamar al-Zaman also wept when seeing the birds thus bewail their mate, and call to mind his wife and father. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of day, and ceased to say her permitted say. When it was the 213th night, she said, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that Kamar al-Zaman wept and lamented his separation from spouse and sire when he beheld those two birds weeping over their mate. Then he looked at the twain, and saw them dig a grave, and therein bury the slain bird. After which they flew away far into the firmament, and disappeared for a while. But presently they returned with the murderer bird, and alighting on the grave of the murdered, stamped on the slayer till they had done him to death. Then they rent his belly, and tearing out his entrails, poured the blood on the grave of the slain. Moreover, they stripped off his skin, and tare his flesh in pieces, pulling out the rest of the bowels, and scattering them hither and thither. All this while Kamar al-Zaman was watching them wonderingly, but presently, chancing to look at the place where the two birds had slain the third, he saw therein something gleaming. So he drew near to it, and noted that it was the crop of the dead bird. Whereupon he took it and opened it, and found the talisman which had been the cause of his separation from his wife. But when he saw it and knew it, he fell to the ground a-fainting for joy. And when he revived, he said, "Praised be Allah! This is a foretaste of good, and a presage of reunion with my beloved." Then he examined the jewel, and passed it over his eyes, after which he bound it to his forearm, rejoicing in coming weal, and walked about till nightfall, awaiting the gardener's return. And when he came not, he lay down and slept in his wonted place. At daybreak he rose to his work, and girding his middle with a cord of palm fibre, took hatchet and basket, and walked down the length of the garden till he came to a carob tree, and struck the axe into its roots. The blow rang and resounded, so he cleared away the soil from the place, and discovered a trap-door, and raised it. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of day, and ceased saying her permitted say. When it was the 214th night, she said, "It hath reached me, O auspicious King, that when Kamar al-Zaman raised the trapdoor, he found a winding stair, which he descended, and came to an ancient vault of the time of Ad and Thamud, hewn out of the rock. Round the vault stood many brazen vessels of the bigness of a great oil jar, which he found full of gleaming red gold, whereupon he said to himself, 'Verily sorrow is gone, and solace is come.' Then he mounted from the souterrain to the garden, and replacing the trapdoor as it was before, busied himself in conducting water to the trees till the last of the day, when the gardener came back and said to him, 'O my son, rejoice at the good tidings of a speedy return to thy native land. The merchants are ready equipped for the voyage, and the ship in 3 days' time will set sail for the city of Ebony, which is the first of the cities of the Moslems, and after making it, thou must travel by land a 6 months' march, till thou come to the islands of Khalidan, the dominions of King Shahriman.' At this Kamar al-Zaman rejoiced and began repeating, 'Part not from one whose wont is not to part from you, nor with your cruel taunts an innocent mortify. Another, so long parted, had ta'en heart from you, and had his whole condition changed. But not so I.' Then he kissed the gardener's hand and said, 'O my father, even as thou hast brought me glad tidings, so I also have great good news for thee,' and told him anent his discovery of the vault, whereat the gardener rejoiced and said, 'O my son, 80 years have I dwelt in this garden, and have never hit on aught, while thou, who hast not sojourned with me a year, hast discovered this thing. Wherefore it is heaven's gift to thee, which shall end thy crosses, and aid thee to rejoin thy folk, and foregather with her thou lovest.' Quoth Kamar al-Zaman, 'There is no help but it must be shared between me and thee.' Then he carried him to the underground chamber, and showed him the gold, which was in 20 jars. He took 10, and the gardener 10, and the old man said to him, 'O my son, fill thyself leather bottles with the sparrow olives which grow in this garden, for they are not found except in our land, and the merchants carry them to all parts. Lay the gold in the bottles, and strew it over with olives, then stop them and cover them, and take them with thee in the ship." So Kamar al-Zaman arose without stay or delay, and took 50 leather bottles, and stored in each somewhat of the gold, and closed each one after placing a layer of olives over the gold, and at the bottom of one of the bottles he laid the talisman. Then sat he down to talk with the gardener, confident of speedy reunion with his own people, and saying to himself, "When I come to the Ebony Islands, I will journey thence to my father's country and inquire for my beloved Budur. Would to heaven I knew whether she returned to her own land or journeyed on to my father's country, or whether there befell her any accident by the way." And he began versifying: "Love in my breast they lit and fared away, and far the land wherein my love is pent. Far lies the camp, and those who camp therein. Far is her tent shrine, where I ne'er shall tent. Patience far deaf me when from me they fled. Sleep failed mine eyes, endurance was forspent. They left, and with them left my every joy, wending with them, nor find I peace that went. They made these eyes roll down love tears in flood, and lacking them, these eyne with tears are drent. When my taste spins once again would see them, when pine and expectation but augment, in my heart's core their counterfeits I trace, with love and yearning to behold their grace." Then, while he awaited the end of the term of days, he told the gardener the tale of the birds, and what had passed between them, whereat the hearer wondered, and they both lay down and slept till the morning. The gardener awoke sick, and abode thus 2 days. But on the 3rd day his sickness increased on him, till they despaired of his life, and Kamar al-Zaman grieved with sore grief for him. Meanwhile, behold, the master and his crew came and inquired for the gardener, and when Kamar al-Zaman told them that he was sick, they asked, "Where be the youth who is minded to go with us to the Ebony Islands?" "He is your servant, and standeth before you," answered the prince, and bade them carry the bottles of olives to the ship. So they transported them, saying, "Make haste now, for the wind is fair." And he replied, "I hear and obey." Then he carried his provant on board, and returning to bid the gardener farewell, found him in the agonies of death. So he sat down at his head, and closed his eyes, and his soul departed his body. Whereupon he laid him out, and committed him to the earth, unto the mercy of Allah Almighty. Then he made for the ship, but found that she had already weighed anchor and set sail. Nor did she cease to cleave the seas till she disappeared from his sight. So he went back to whence he came, heavy-hearted with whirling head, and neither would he address a soul, nor return a reply. And reaching the garden, and sitting down in cark and care, he threw dust on his head, and buffeted his cheeks. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of day, and ceased saying her permitted say. End of Section 34 of the Book of 1000 Nights and a Night, Volume 3. Recording by Leonard Wilson, Springfield, Ohio.
Section 35, Volume 3 of the Book of 1000 Nights and a Night, translated by Richard Burton. This is a Librivox recording. All Librivox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Linda Moreau. The Book of 1000 Nights and a Night, Volume 3, Section 35. When it was the 215th night, she said, "It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that when the ship sped on her course, Kamar al-Zaman returned to the garden in cark and care. But anon he rent the place of its owner, and hired a man to help him in irrigating the trees. Moreover, he repaired the trap door, and he went to the underground chamber, and bringing the rest of the gold to Grass, stowed it in other 50 bottles, which he filled up with a layer of olives. Then he inquired of the ship, and they told him that it sailed but once a year, at which his trouble of mind redoubled, and he cried sore for that which had betided him, above all for the loss of the Princess Budur's talisman. And he spent his nights and days weeping and repeating verses. Such was his case, but as regards the ship, she sailed with a favouring wind till she reached the Ebony Islands. Now by decree of destiny, Queen Budur was sitting at a lattice window overlooking the sea, and saw the galley cast anchor upon the strand. At this sight her heart throbbed, and she took horse with the chamberlains and nabobs, and riding down to the shore, halted by the ship, whilst the sailors broke bulk and bore the bales to the storehouses. After which she called the captain to her presence, and asked what he had with him. He answered, "O king, I have with me in this ship aromatic drugs and cosmetics and healing powders and ointments and plasters and precious metals and rich stuffs and rugs of Yemen leather, not to be borne of mule or camel, and all manner of otters and spices and perfumes, civet and ambergris and camphor and Sumatra aloes wood and tamarinds, and sparrow olives to boot, such as are rare to find in this country." When she heard talk of sparrow olives, her heart longed for them, and she said to the shipmaster, "How much of olives hast thou?" He replied, 50 bottles full, but their owner is not with us, so the king shall take what he will of them." Quoth she, "Bring them ashore, that I may see them." Thereupon he called to the sailors, who brought her the 50 bottles, and she opened one, and looking at the olives, said to the captain, "I will take the whole 50, and pay you their value, whatso it be." He answered, "By Allah, O my lord, they have no value in our country. Moreover, their shipper tarried behind us, and he is a poor man." Asked she, "And what are they worth here?" And he answered, 1,000 dirhams. "I will take them at 1,000," she said, and bade them carry the 50 bottles to the palace. When it was night, she called for a bottle of olives and opened it, there being none in the room but herself and the Princess Hayat al-Nufus. Then, placing a dish before her, she turned into it the contents of the jar, when there fell out into the dish with the olives a heap of red gold. And she said to the lady Hayat al-Nufus, "This is naught but gold." So she sent for the rest of the bottles, and found them all full of precious metal, and scarce enough olives to fill a single jar. Moreover, she sought among the gold, and found therein the talisman, which she took and examined, and behold, it was that which Kamar al-Zaman had taken from off the band of her petticoat trousers. Thereupon she cried out for joy, and slipped down in a swoon. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of day, and ceased to say her permitted say. When it was the 216th night, she said, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that when King Budur saw the talisman, she cried out for joy, and slipped down in a swoon. And when she recovered, she said to herself, Verily, this talisman was the cause of my separation from my beloved Kamar al-Zaman, but now it is an omen of good. Then she showed it to Hayat al-Nufus, and said to her, This was the cause of disunion, and now, please Allah, it shall be the cause of reunion. As soon as the day dawned, she seated herself on the royal throne, and sent for the shipmaster, who came into the presence and kissed the ground before her. Quoth she, Where didst thou leave the owner of these olives? Quoth he, O king of the age, we left him in the land of the Magians, and he is a gardener there. She rejoined, Except thou bring him to me, thou knowest not the harm which awaiteth thee in thy ship. Then she bade them seal up the magazines of the merchants, and she said to them, Verily, the owner of these olives hath borrowed of me, and I have a claim upon him for debt, and unless ye bring him to me, I will without fail do you all die, and seize your goods. So they went to the captain, and promised him the hire of the ship, if he would go and return a second time, saying, Deliver us from this masterful tyrant. Accordingly the skipper embarked and set sail, and Allah decreed him a prosperous voyage, till he came to the island of the Magians, and lighting by night, went up to the garden. Now the night was long upon Kamar al-Zaman, and he sat, bethinking him of his beloved, and bewailing what had befallen him, and versifying, A night whose stars refuse to run their course, a night of those which never seem outworn, like resurrection day, of longsome length to him that watched and waited for the morn. Now at this moment the captain knocked at the garden gate, and Kamar al-Zaman opened and went out to him, whereupon the crew seized him and went down with him on board the ship and set sail forthright. And they ceased not voyaging days and nights, whilst Kamar al-Zaman knew not why they dealt thus with him. But when he questioned them, they replied, Thou hast offended against the Lord of the Ebony Islands, the son-in-law of King Armanus, and thou hast stolen his monies, miserable that thou art. Said he, By Allah, I never entered that country, nor do I know where it is. However, they fared on with him till they made the Ebony Islands, and landing, carried him up to the Lady Budur, who knew him at sight, and said, Leave him with the eunuchs, that they may take him to the bath. Then she relieved the merchants of the embargo, and gave the captain a robe of honour, worth 10,000 pieces of gold. And after returning to the palace, she went in that night to the Princess Hayat al-Nufus, and told her what had passed, saying, Keep thou my counsel, till I accomplish my purpose, and do a deed which shall be recorded, and shall be read by kings and commoners after we be dead and gone. And when she gave orders that they bear Kamar al-Zaman to the bath, they did so, and clad him in a royal habit, so that, when he came forth, he resembled a willow bough, or a star which shamed the greater and lesser light, and its glow and his life and soul returned to his frame. Then he repaired to the palace, and went in to the Princess Budur. And when she saw him, she schooled her heart to patience, till she should have accomplished her purpose. And she bestowed on him Mamelukes and eunuchs, camels and mules. Moreover, she gave him a treasury of money, and she ceased not advancing him from dignity to dignity, till she made him Lord High Treasurer, and committed to his charge all the treasures of the state. And she admitted him to familiar favour, and acquainted the emirs with his rank and dignity. And all loved him, for Queen Budur did not cease day by day to increase his allowances. As for Kamar al-Zaman, he was at a loss anent to the reason of her thus honouring him, and he gave gifts of largesse out of the abundance of the wealth, and he devoted himself to the service of King Armanus, so that the king and all the emirs and people, great and small, adored him, and were wont to swear by his life. Nevertheless, he ever marvelled at the honour and favour shown him by Queen Budur, and said to himself, By Allah, there needs must be a reason for this affection. Peradventure this king favoureth me not with these immoderate favours, save for some ill purpose, and therefore there is no help but that I crave leave of him to depart his realm. So he went in to Queen Budur, and said to her, O king, thou hast overwhelmed me with favours, but it will fulfil the measure of thy bounties if thou take from me all thou hast been pleased to bestow upon me, and permit me to depart. She smiled and asked, What maketh thee seek to depart and plunge into new perils, whereas thou art in the enjoyment of the highest favour and greatest prosperity? Answered Kamar al-Zaman, O king, verily this favour, if there be no reason for it, is indeed a wonder of wonders, more by token that thou hast advanced me to dignities such as befit men of age and experience, albeit I am as it were a young child. And Queen Budur rejoined, The reason is that I love thee for thine exceeding loveliness and thy surpassing beauty, and if thou wilt but grant me my desire of thy body, I will advance thee yet farther in honour and favour and largesse, and I will make thee Wazir, for all thy tender age, even as the folk made me Sultan over them, and I no older than thou. So that nowadays there is nothing strange when children take the head, and by Allah he was a gifted man who said, It seems as though of Lot's tribe were our days, and crave with love to advance the young in years. When Kamar al-Zaman heard these words, he was abashed, and his cheeks flushed till they seemed to flame, and he said, I need not these favours which lead to the commission of sin. I will live poor in wealth, but wealthy in virtue and honour. Quoth she, I am not to be duped by thy scruples, arising from prudery and coquettish ways. And Allah bless him who saith, To him I spake of coupling, but he said to me, how long this noyous long persistency? But when gold piece I showed him, he cried, who from the Almighty Sovereign e'er shall flee? Now when Kamar al-Zaman heard these words and understood her verses and their import, he said, O King, I have not the habit of these doings, nor have I the strength to bear these heavy burthens for which elder than I have proved unable. Then how will it be with my tender age? But she smiled at his speech and retorted, Indeed, it is a matter right marvellous how error springeth from the disorder of man's intendiment. Since thou art a boy, why standest thou in fear of sin or the doing of things forbidden, seeing that thou art not yet come to years of canonical responsibility, and the offences of a child incur neither punishment nor reproof? Verily, thou hast committed thyself to a quibble for the sake of contention, and it is thy duty to bow before a proposal of fruition. So henceforward cease from denial and coyness, for the commandment of Allah is a decree foreordained. Indeed, I have more reason than thou to fear falling, and by sin to be misled. And well inspired was he who said, My prickle is big, and the little one said, Thrust boldly in vitals with lion-like stroke. Then I, 'tis a sin, and he, no sin to me. So I had him at once with a counterfeit poke. When Kamar al-Zaman heard these words, the light became darkness in his sight, and he said, O King, thou hast in thy household fair women and female slaves who have not their like in this age. Shall not these suffice thee without me? Do thy will with them, and let me go. She replied, Thou sayest sooth, but it is not with them that one who loveth thee can heal himself of torment, and can abate his fever. For when taste and inclinations are corrupted by vice, they hear and obey other than good advice. So leave arguing, and listen to what the poet saith. Seest not the bazaar with its fruit in rows? These men are for figs, and for sycamore those. And what another saith, Many whose anklet rings are dumb have tinkling belts, and this hath all content, while that for want must wail. Thou biddest me be a fool and quit thee for her charms. Allah forfend I leave the faith, turn infidel. Nay, by rights of side-bearded mocking all her curls, nor mot nor maid from thee my heart shall spell. And yet another, O beauty's union, love for thee's my creed, free choice of faith, and eke my best desire. Women I have forsworn for thee, so may deem me all men this day a shaveling friar. And yet another, even not beardless one with girl, nor heed the spy who saith to thee, 'Tis an amiss. Far different is the girl whose feet one kisses, and that gazelle whose feet the earth must kiss. And yet another, a boy of twice 10 is fit for a king. And yet another, the penis smooth and round was made with anus best to match it. Had it been made for cunness' sake, it had been formed like a hatchet. And yet another said, My soul thy sacrifice I chose thee out. Who art thou not menstruous, nor oviparous, did I with women mell? I should beget brats till the wide, wide world grew straight for us. And yet another, she saith, sore hurt in the sense most acute, for she had proffered what did not besuit. Unless thou stroke as man should swive his wife, blame not when horns thy brow shall incornute. Thy wand seems waxen, to a limpo grown, and more I palm it, softer grows the brute. And yet another, quoth she, for I to lie with her forbore, O folly following fool, O fool to the core, if thou my coynte for Kibla to thy quenya reject, weal shall please thee more. And yet another, she proffered me her tender coynte, quoth I will not roger thee. She drew back, saying, from the faith he turns who's turned by heaven's decree, and frontwise fluttering in one day is obsolete persistency. Then she swung round, and shining rump like silvern lump she showed me. I cried, well done, O mistress mine, no more am I in pain for thee. O thou of all that Allah oped, show me fairest victory. And yet another, Men craving pardon will uplift their hands, women pray pardon with their legs on high. Out on it for a pious, prayerful work, the Lord shall raise it in the depths to lie. When Kamar al-Zaman heard this poetry, and was certified that there was no escaping compliance with what willed she, he said, O King of the age, if thou must needs have it so, make covenant with me that thou wilt do this thing with me but once, though it avail not to correct thy depraved appetite, and thou wilt never again require this thing of me to the end of time, so perchance Allah may purge me of the sin. She replied, I promise thee this thing, hoping that Allah of his favour will relent toward us both and blot out our mortal offence. For the girdle of heaven's forgiveness is not indeed so strait, but it may compass us around and absolve us of the excess of our heinous sins, and bring us to the light of salvation out of the darkness of error. And indeed excellently well saith the poet, of evil thing the folk suspect us twain, and to this thought their hearts and souls are bent. Come, dear, let's justify and free their souls that wrong us. One good bout, and then repent. Thereupon she made him a solid agreement and a covenant, and swore a solemn oath by him who is self-existent, that this thing should befall betwixt them but once, and never again for all time, and that the desire of him was driving her to death and perdition. So he rose up with her on this condition, and went with her to her own boudoir, that she might quench the lowe of her lust, saying, There is no majesty, and there is no might save in Allah, the glorious, the great. This is the fated decree of Allah powerful, Allah wise. And he doffed his bag trousers, shameful and abashed, with the tears running from his eyes for stress of affright. Thereat she smiled, and making him mount upon a couch with her, said to him, After this night thou shalt see naught that will offend thee. Then she turned to him, bussing and bosoming, and bending calf over calf, and said to him, Put thy hand between my thighs to the accustomed place, so haply it may stand up to prayer after prostration. He wept and cried, I am not good at aught of this. But she said, But my life, and thou do as I bid thee, it shall profit thee. So he put out his hand with vitals of fire for confusion, and found her thighs cooler than cream and softer than silk. The touching of them pleasured him, and he moved his hand hither and thither, till it came to a dome abounding in good gifts, and movements, and shifts, and said in himself, Perhaps this king is a hermaphrodite, neither man nor woman quite. So he said to her, O king, I cannot find that thou hast a tool like the tools of men. What then moved thee to do this deed? Then loudly laughed the Queen Budur, till she fell on her back, and said, O my dearling, how quickly thou hast forgotten the nights we have lain together. Then she made herself known to him, and he knew her for his wife, the Lady Budur, daughter of King Al-Ghayur, lord of the isles and the seas. So he embraced her, and she embraced him, and he kissed her, and she kissed him. Then they lay down on the bed of pleasure voluptuous, repeating the words of the poet. When his softly bending shape bid him close to my embrace, which clips him all about like tendrils of the vine, and shed a flood of softness on the hardness of his heart, he yielded, though at first he was minded to decline, and dreading lest the railer's eye should light upon his form, came armoured with caution to baffle his design. His waist makes moan of hinder cheeks that weigh upon his feet, like heavy load of merchandise upon young camel lion. Girt with his glances scimitar which seemed athirst for blood, and clad in mail of dusky curls that show the sheeniest shine, his fragrance wafted happy news of footstep coming nigh, and to him like a bird uncaged I flew in the straightest line. I spread my cheek upon his path beneath his sandal shoon, and lo, the stibium of their dust healed all my hurt avine. With one embrace again I bound the banner of our loves, and loosed the knot of my delight that bound in bonds malign. Then bade I make high festival, and straight come flocking in. Pure joys know not of grizzled age, nor aught of pain and pine. The full moon dotted with the stars the lips and pearly teeth, that dance right joyously upon the bubbling face of wine. So in the prayer niche of their joys I yielded me to what would make the humblest penitent of sinners most indign. I swear by all the signs of those glories in his face, I'll ne'er forget the chapter entitled Al-Ikhlas. Then Queen Budur told Kamar al-Zaman all that had befallen her from beginning to end, and he did likewise, after which he began to upbraid her, saying, "What moved thee to deal with me as thou hast done this night?" She replied, "Pardon me, for I did this by way of jest, and that pleasure and gladness might be increased." And when dawned the morn and day arose with its sheen and shone, she went to King Armanus, sire of the Lady Hayat al-Nufus, and acquainted him with the truth of the case, and that she was wife to Kamar al-Zaman. Moreover, she told him their tale and the cause of their separation, and how his daughter was a virgin, pure as when she was born. He marvelled at their story with exceeding marvel, and bade them chronicle it in letters of gold. Then he turned to Kamar al-Zaman and said, "O King's son, art thou minded to become my son-in-law by marrying my daughter?" Replied he, "I must consult the Queen Budur, as she hath a claim upon me for benefits without stint." And when he took counsel with her, she said, "Right is thy reckoning. Marry her, and I will be her handmaid, for I am her debtor for kindness and favour and good offices, and obligations manifold, especially as we are here in her place, and as the king her father hath whelmed us with benefits." Now when he saw that she inclined to this, and was not jealous of Hayat al-Nufus, he agreed with her upon this matter. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of day, and ceased saying her permitted say. End of Section 35 of the Book of 1000 Nights and a Night, Volume 3. Section 36, Volume 3 of the Book of 1000 Nights and a Night, translated by Richard Burton. This is a Librivox recording. All Librivox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Linda Moreau. The Book of 1000 Nights and a Night, Volume 3, Section 36. When it was the 217th night, she said, "It hath reached me, O auspicious King, that Kamar al-Zaman agreed with his wife Queen Budur upon this matter, and told King Armanus what she had said, whereat he rejoiced with great joy. Then he went out, and seating himself upon his chair of estate, assembled all the wazirs, emirs, chamberlains, and grandees, to whom he related the whole story of Kamar al-Zaman and his wife Queen Budur, from first to last, and acquainted them with his desire to marry his daughter Hayat al-Nufus to the prince, and make him king instead of Queen Budur. Whereupon said they all, "Since he is the husband of Queen Budur, who hath been our king till now, whilst we deemed her son-in-law to King Armanus, we are all content to have him to sultan over us, and we will be his servants, nor will we swerve from his allegiance." So Armanus rejoiced hereat, and summoning qazis and witnesses and the chief officers of state, bade draw up the contract of marriage between Kamar al-Zaman and his daughter, the Princess Hayat al-Nufus. Then he held high festival, giving sumptuous marriage feasts and bestowing costly dresses of honor upon all the emirs and captains of the host. Moreover, he distributed alms to the poor and needy, and set free all the prisoners. The whole world rejoiced in the coming of Kamar al-Zaman to the throne, blessing him and wishing him endurance of glory and prosperity, renown and felicity. And as soon as he became king, he remitted the customs dues and released all men who remained in jail. Thus he abode a long while, ordering himself worthily toward his lieges. And he lived with his two wives in peace, happiness, constancy, and content, lying the night with each of them in turn. He ceased not after this fashion during many years, for indeed all his troubles and afflictions were blotted out from him, and he forgot his father King Shahriman in his former estate of honor and favor with him. After a while Almighty Allah blessed him with two boy children, as they were two shining moons, through his two wives, the elder whose name was Prince Amjad, by Queen Budur, and the younger whose name was Prince Asad, by Queen Hayat al-Nufus. And this one was comelier than his brother. They were reared in splendor and tender affection, in respectful bearing and in the perfection of training, and they were instructed in penmanship and science, and the arts of government and horsemanship, till they attained the extreme accomplishments at the utmost limit of beauty and loveliness, both men and women being ravished by their charms. They grew up side by side till they reached the age of 17, eating and drinking together and sleeping in one bed, nor ever parting at any time or tide, wherefore all the people envied them. Now when they came to a man's estate and were endowed with every perfection, their father was wont, as often he went on a journey, to make them sit in his stead by turns in the hall of judgment, and each did justice among the folk one day at a time. But it came to pass by confirmed fate and determined lot, that love for As'ad, son of Queen Hayat al-Nufus, rose in the heart of Queen Budur, and that affection for Amjad, son of Queen Budur, rose in the heart of Queen Hayat al-Nufus. Hence it was that each of the women used to sport and play with the son of her sister-wife, kissing him and straining him to her bosom, while each mother thought that the other's behavior arose from maternal affection. On this wise passion got the mastery of the two young women's hearts, and they became madly in love with the two youths, so that when the other's son came in to either of them, she would press him to her breast and long for him never to be parted from her, till at last, when waiting grew longsome to them, and they found no path to enjoyment, they refused meat and drink, and banished the solace of sleep. Presently the king fared forth to course and chase, bidding his two sons sit to do justice in his stead, each one day in his turn as was their wont. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of day, and ceased to say her permitted say. When it was the 218th night, she said, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that the king fared forth to sport and hunt, bidding his two sons sit to do justice in his stead, each one day by turn, as was their wont. Now Prince Amjad sat in judgment the first day, bidding and forbidding, appointing and deposing, giving and refusing, and Queen Hayat al-Nufus, the mother of As'ad, wrote to him a letter, suing for his favor and discovering to him her passion and devotion. Altogether put Tiny off the mask, and giving him to know that she desired to enjoy him. So she took a scroll, and thereon indited these cadences. From the love deranged, the sorrowful and estranged, whose torment is prolonged for the longing of thee. Were I to recount to thee the extent of my care, and what of sadness I bear, the passion which my heart cloth tear, and all that I endure for weeping and unrest, and the rending of my sorrowful breast, my unremitting grief, and my woe without relief, and all my suffering for severance of thee, and sadness and love's ardency, no letter could contain it, nor calculation could compass it. Indeed, earth and heaven upon me are strait, and I have no hope and no trust but what from thee I await. Upon death I am come nigh, and the horrors of dissolution I abye. Burning upon me is sore, with parting pangs and estrangement galore. Were I to set forth the yearnings that possess me more and more, no scrolls would suffice to hold such store. And of the excess of my pain and pine, I have made the following lines. Were I to dwell on heart-consuming heat, unease and transports in my spins meet. Nothing were left of ink and reed and pen, nor aught of paper, no, not e'en a sheet. Then Queen Hayat al-Nufus wrapped up her letter in a niece of costly silk, scented with musk and ambergris, and folded it up with her silken hair-strings, whose cost swallowed down treasures, laid it in a handkerchief, and gave it to a eunuch, bidding him bear it to Prince Amjad. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of day, and ceased saying her permitted say. When it was the 219th night, she said, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that she gave her missive to the eunuch in waiting, and bade him bear it to Prince Amjad. And that eunuch went forth, ignoring what the future hid for him. For the Omniscient ordereth events even as he willeth. And going in to the prince, kissed the ground between his hands, and handed him the letter. On receiving the kerchief he opened it, and reading the epistle, and recognizing its gist, he was ware that his father's wife was essentially an adulteress, and a traitress at heart to her husband, King Kamar al-Zaman. So he waxed wroth with exceeding wrath, and railed at women and their works, saying, Allah curse women, the traitress, the imperfect in reason and religion. Then he drew his sword, and said to the eunuch, Out on thee, thou wicked slave! Dost thou carry messages of disloyalty for thy lord's wife? By Allah, there is no good in thee, O black of hue and heart, O foul of face and nature's forming. So he smote him on the neck, and severed his head from his body. Then folding the kerchief over its contents, he thrust it into his breast pocket, and went in to his own mother and told her what had passed, reviling and reproaching her, and saying, Each one of you is viler than the other, and by Allah the Great and Glorious, did I not fear ill-manneredly to transgress against the rights of my father Kamar al-Zaman and my brother Prince Asad, I would assuredly go into her and cut off her head, even as I cut off that of her eunuch. Then he went forth from his mother in a mighty rage, and when the news reached Queen Hayat al-Nufus of what he had done to her eunuch, she abused him and cursed him and plotted perfidy against him. He passed the night sick with rage, wrath, and concern, nor found he pleasure in meat, drink, or sleep. And when the next morning dawned, Prince Asad fared forth in his turn to rule the folk in his father's stead, whilst his mother, Hayat al-Nufus, awoke in feeble plight because of what she had heard from Prince Amjad concerning the slaughter of her eunuch. So Prince Asad sat in the audience chamber that day, judging and administering justice, appointing and deposing, bidding and forbidding, giving and bestowing. And he ceased not thus till near the time of afternoon prayer, when Queen Budur sent forth a crafty old woman, and discovering to her what was in her heart, wrote a letter to Prince Asad, complaining of the excess of her affection and desire for him in these cadenced lines. From her who perisheth for passion and love forlorn, to him who in nature and culture is goodliest born, to him who is conceited of his own loveliness, and glories in his amorous grace, who from those that seek to enjoy him averteth his face, and refuseth to show favour unto the self-abasing and base, him who is cruel and of disdainful mood, from the lover despairing of good, to Prince Asad with passing beauty endowed, and of excelling grace proud, of the face moon bright, and the brow flower white, and dazzling splendid light. This is my letter to him whose love melteth my body, and rendeth my skin and bones. Know that my patience faileth me quite, and I am perplexed in my plight. Longing and restless weary me, and sleep and patience deny themselves to me. But mourning and watching stick fast to me, and desire and passion torment me, and the extremes of languor and sickness have sheet me. Yet may my life be a ransom for thee, albeit thy pleasure be to slay her who loveth thee, and Allah prolong the life of thee, and preserve thee from all infirmity. And after these cadences she wrote these couplets. Fate hath commanded I become thy fear, O shining like full moon when clearest clear. All beauty dost embrace, all eloquence, brighter than aught within our worldly sphere. Content am I my torturer thou be, haply shalt alms me with one lovely leer. Happy her death who dieth for thy love, no good in her who holdeth thee unclear. And also the following couplets. Unto thee, Asad, I of passion pangs complain. Have ruth on slave of love so burnt with flaming pain. How long, I ask, shall hands of love disport with me? With longings, dolour, sleeplessness, and bale and bane. Anon I plain of sea and heart, anon of fire. In vitals, O strange case, dear wish, my fairest fain. O blamer, cease thy blame, and seek thyself to fly from love, which makes these eyne a rill of tears to rain. How oft I cry for absence and desire, ah, grief! But all my crying naught of gain for me shall gain. Thy rigours dealt me sickness passing power to bear. Thou'rt my only leech, assain me an thou deign. O chider, chide me not in caution, for I doubt that plaguy love to thee shall also deal about. Then Queen Budur perfumed the letter paper with a profusion of odoriferous musk, and winding it in her hair strings, which were of Iraqi silk, with pendants of oblong emeralds, set with pearls and stones of price, delivered it to the old woman, bidding her carry it to Prince Asad. She did so in order to pleasure her, and going in to the prince straightway and without stay, found him in his own rooms and delivered to him the letter in privacy. After which she stood waiting for an hour or so for an answer. When Asad had read the paper and knew its purport, he wrapped it up again in the ribbons and put it in his bosom pocket. Then he, for he was wrath beyond all measure of wrath, he cursed false women and sprang up, and drawing his sword, smote the old trot on the neck and cut off her pate. Thereupon he went in to his mother, Queen Hayat al-Nufus, whom he found lying on her bed in feeble case, for that which hath betided her with Prince Amjad, and railed at her and cursed her, after which he left her and foregathered with his brother, to whom he related all that had befallen him with Queen Budur, adding, By Allah, O my brother, but that I was ashamed before thee, I had gone in to her forthright and had smitten her head off her shoulders. Replied Prince Amjad, By Allah, O my brother, yesterday when I was sitting upon the seat of judgment, the like of what hath befallen thee, this day befell me also with thy mother, who sent me a letter of similar purport. And he told him all that had passed, adding, By Allah, O my brother, naught but respect for thee withheld me from going in to her and dealing with her even as I dealt with the eunuch. They passed the rest of the night conversing and cursing womankind, and agreed to keep the matter secret, lest their father should hear of it and kill the two women. Yet they ceased not to suffer trouble and foresee affliction. And when the morrow dawned, the king returned with his suite from hunting and sat awhile in his chair of estate, after which he sent the emirs about their business and went up to his palace, where he found his two wives lying abed, and both exceeding sick and weak. Now they had made a plot against their two sons, and concerted to do away with their lives, for that they had exposed themselves before them, and feared to be at their mercy, and dependent upon their forbearance. When Kamar al-Zaman saw them on this wise, he said to them, What aileth you? Whereupon they rose to him, and kissing his hands, answered, perverting the case and saying, Know, O king, that thy two sons, who have been reared in thy bounty, have played thee false, and have dishonored thee in the persons of thy wives. Know that when he heard this, the light became darkness in his sight, and he raged with such wrath that his reason fled. Then he said to them, Explain me this matter. Replied Queen Budur, O king of the age, know that these many days past thy son As'ad hath been in the persistent habit of sending me letters and messages to solicit me to lewdness and adultery, while I still forbade him from this. But he would not be forbidden, and when thou wentest forth to hunt, he rushed in on me, drunk and with a drawn sword in his hand, and smiting my eunuch, slew him. Then he mounted on my breast, still holding the sword, and I feared lest he should slay me, if I gainsayed him, even as he had slain my eunuch. So he took his wicked will of me by force. And now, if thou do me not justice on him, O king, I will slay him myself with my own hand, for I have no need of life in the world after this foul deed. And Queen Hayat al-Nufus, choking with tears, told him respecting Prince Amjad a story like that of her sister wife. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of day, and ceased to say her permitted say. When it was the 220th night, she said, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that Queen Hayat al-Nufus told her husband, King Kamar al-Zaman, a story like that of her sister in wedlock, Budur, and quoth she, The same thing befell me with thy son Amjad. After which she took to weeping and wailing, and said, Except thou do me justice on him, I will tell my father, King Armanus. Then both women wept with sore weeping before King Kamar al-Zaman, who, when he saw their tears and heard their words, concluded that their story was true, and waxing wroth beyond measure of wrath, went forth, thinking to fall upon his two sons and put them to death. On his way he met his father-in-law, King Armanus, who, hearing of his return from the chase, had come to salute him at that very hour, and seeing him with naked brand in hand, and blood dripping from his nostrils, for excess of rage, asked what ailed him. So Kamar al-Zaman told him all that his sons Amjad and As'ad had done, and added, And here I am now going into them to slay them in the foulest way, and make of them the most shameful of examples. Quoth King Armanus, and indeed he too was wroth with them, Thou dost well, O my son, and may Allah not bless them, nor any sons that do such deed against their father's honor. But, O my son, the sayer of the old saw saith, Whoso looketh not to the end hath not fortune to friend. In any case they are thy sons, and it befitteth not that thou kill them with thine own hand, lest thou drink of their death agony, and anon repent of having slain them, whenas repentance availeth thee naught. Rather do thou send them with one of thy Mamelukes into the desert, and let him kill them there, out of thy sight. For as saith the adage, Out of sight of my friend is better and pleasanter. And when Kamar al-Zaman heard his father-in-law's words, he knew them to be just. So he sheathed his sword, and turning back, sat down upon the throne of his realm. There he summoned his treasurer, a very old man, versed in affairs and in fortune's vicissitudes, to whom he said, Go in to my sons Amjad and Asad, bind their hands behind them with strong bonds, lay them in 2 chests, and load them upon a mule. Then take horse thou, and carry them into mid-desert, where do thou kill them both, and fill 2 vials with their blood, and bring the same to me in haste. Replied the treasurer, I hear and I obey. And he rose up hurriedly, and went out forthright to seek the princes. And on his road he met them coming out of the palace vestibule, for they had donned their best clothes and their richest, and they were on their way to salute their sire, and give him joy of safe return from his going forth to hunt. Now when he saw them, he laid hands on them, saying, O my sons, know ye that I am but a slave commanded, and that your father hath laid a commandment on me. Will ye obey his commandment? They said, Yes. Whereupon he went to them, and after pinioning their arms, laid them in the chests which he loaded on the back of a mule he had taken from the city. And he ceased not carrying them into open country till near noon, when he halted in a waste and desolate place, and dismounting from his mare, let down the 2 chests from the mule's back. Then he opened them, and took out Amjad and Asad, and when he looked upon them, he wept sore for their beauty and loveliness. Then drawing his sword, he said to them, By Allah, O my lords, indeed it is hard for me to deal so evilly by you, but I am to be excused in this matter, being but a slave commanded, for that your father, King Kamar al-Zaman, hath bidden me strike off your heads. They replied, O Emir, do the king's bidding, for we bear with patience that which Allah, to whom be honor, might, and glory, hath decreed to us, and thou art quit of our blood. Then they embraced and bade each other farewell, and Asad said to the treasurer, Allah upon thee, O uncle, spare me the sight of my brother's death agony, and make me not drink of his anguish, but kill me first, for that were easier for me. And Amjad said the like, and entreated the treasurer to kill him before Asad, saying, My brother is younger than I, so make me not taste of his anguish. And they both wept bitter tears, whilst the treasurer wept for their weeping. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of day, and ceased saying her permitted say. End of section 36 of the Book of 1000 Nights and a Night, Volume 3. Section 37, Volume 3 of the Book of 1000 Nights and a Night, translated by Richard Burton. This is a Librivox recording. All Librivox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Linda Moreau. The Book of 1000 Nights and a Night, Volume 3, Section 37. When it was the 221st night, she said, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that the treasurer wept for their weeping. Then the 2 brothers embraced and bade farewell, and one said to the other, All this cometh of the malice of those traitresses, my mother and thy mother, and this is the reward of my forbearance toward thy mother, and of thy forbearance toward my mother. But there is no might and there is no majesty save in Allah, the glorious, the great. Verily, we are Allah's, and unto him we are returning. And Asad embraced his brother, sobbing and repeating these couplets. O thou to whom sad trembling wights in fear complain, O ever ready whatso cometh to sustain, the sole resource for me is at thy door to knock, and whose door knock and thou to open wilt not deign. O thou whose grace is treasured in the one word, Be, favor me, I beseech, in thee all weals contain. Now when Amjad heard his brother's weeping, he wept also, and pressing him to his bosom, repeated these 2 couplets. O thou whose boons to me are more than one, whose gifts and favours have nor count nor bound. No stroke of all fate's strokes e'er fell on me, but thee to take me by the hand I found. Then said Amjad to the treasurer, I conjure thee by the One, omnipotent, the Lord of mercy, the beneficent, slay me before my brother Asad, so haply shall the fire be quenched in my heart's core, and in this life burn no more. But Asad wept and exclaimed, Not so, I will die first. Whereupon quoth Amjad, It were best that I embrace thee, and thou embrace me, so the sword may fall upon us and slay us both at a single stroke." Thereupon they embraced, face to face, and clung to each other straitly, whilst the treasurer tied up the twain and bound them fast with cords, weeping the while. Then he drew his blade and said to them, "By Allah, O my lords, it is indeed hard to me to slay you. But have ye no last wishes that I may fulfil, or charges which I may carry out, or messages which I may deliver?" Replied Amjad, "We have no wish, and my only charge to thee is that thou set my brother below, and me above him, that the blow may fall on me first. And when thou hast killed us and returnest to the king, and he asketh thee, What heardest thou from them before their death? Do thou answer, Verily, thy sons salute thee and say to thee, Thou knewest not if we were innocent or guilty, yet hast thou put us to death, and hast not certified thyself of our sin nor looked into our case. Then do thou repeat to him these two couplets: Women are Satans made for woe men. I fly to Allah from their devilish scathe, source of whatever bale befell our kind in worldly matters and in things of faith. Continued Amjad, "We desire of thee naught but that thou repeat to our sire these two couplets." And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of day and ceased to say her permitted say. When it was the 222nd Night, she said, It hath reached me, O auspicious King, that Amjad added, speaking to the treasurer, "We desire of thee naught but that thou repeat to our sire these two couplets which thou hast just now heard. And I conjure thee by Allah to have patience with us, whilst I cite to my brother this other pair of couplets." Then he wept with sore weeping and began, "The kings who fared before us showed of instances full many a show, of great and small and high and low, how many this one road have trod." Now when the treasurer heard these words from Amjad, he wept till his beard was wet, whilst As'ad's eyes brimmed with tears, and he in turn repeated these couplets: "Fate frights us when the thing is past and gone. Weeping is not for form or face alone. What ails the nights? Allah blot out our sin, and be the nights by other hand undone. Ere this Zubayr's son felt their spiteful hate, who fled for refuge to the house and stone. Would that when Kharijah was for Amru slain, they had ransomed Ali with all men they own." Then with cheeks stained by tears down railing, he recited also these verses: "In sooth the nights and days are charactered by traitor falsehood, and as knaves they lie, the desert reek recalls their teeth that shine. All horrid blackness is their K of eye. My sin anent the world which I abhor, in sin of sword, when sworders fighting high." Then his sobs waxed louder, and he said, "O thou who wooest a world unworthy, learn, 'tis house of evils, 'tis perdition's net, a house where whoso laughs this day shall weep the next. Then perish house of fume and fret, endless its frays and forays, and its thralls are ne'er redeemed, while endless risks beset. How many gloried in its pomps and prides, till proud and pompous did all bounds forget. Then showing back of shield she made them swill full draught, and claimed all her vengeance debt. For know her strokes fall swift and sure, although long she bide and forslow the course of fate. So look thou on the days, lest life go by idly, and meet thou more than thou hast met, and cut all chains of world love and desire, and save thy soul, and rise to seek retire." Now when As'ad made an end of these verses, he strained his brother Amjad in his arms, till they twain were one body, and the treasurer, drawing his sword, was about to strike them, when behold, his steed took fright at the wind of his upraised hand, and breaking its tether, fled into the desert. Now the horse had cost 1,000 gold pieces, and on its back was a splendid saddle worth much money. So the treasurer threw down his sword and ran after the beast. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of day, and ceased saying her permitted say. When it was the 223rd Night, she said, It hath reached me, O auspicious King, that when his horse ran away, the treasurer ran after it in huge concern, and ceased not running to catch the runaway till it entered a thicket. He followed it whilst it dashed through the wood, smiting the earth with its hoofs, till it raised a dust cloud which towered high in the air, and snorting and puffing and neighing and waxing fierce and furious. Now there happened to be in this thicket a lion of terrible might, hideous to sight, with eyes sparkling light. His look was grim, and his aspect struck fright into man's sprite. Presently the treasurer turned and saw the lion making toward him, but found no way of escape, nor had he his sword with him. So he said to himself, "There is no majesty and there is no might save in Allah, the glorious, the great. This strait is come upon me for no other cause but because of Amjad and As'ad, and indeed this journey was unblessed from the first." Meanwhile the two princes were grievously oppressed by the heat, and grew sore athirst, so that their tongues hung out, and they cried for succour. But none came to their relief, and they said, "Would to heaven we had been slain, and were at peace from this pain! But we know not whither the horse hath fled, that the treasurer is gone, and hath left us thus pinioned. If he would but come back and do us die, it were easier to us than this torture to abide." Said As'ad, "O my brother, be patient, and the relief of Allah, extolled and exalted be He, shall assuredly come to us. For the horse started not away save of His favour toward us, and naught irketh us but the thirst." Upon this he stretched and shook himself, and straightened right and left, till he burst his pinion bonds. Then he rose and unbound his brother, and catching up the Emir's sword, said, "By Allah, we will not go hence till we look after him, and learn what is become of him." Then they took to following on the trail till it led them to the thicket, and they said to each other, "Of a surety the horse and the treasurer have not passed out of this wood." Quoth As'ad, "Stay thou here whilst I enter the thicket and search it." And Amjad replied, "I will not let thee go in alone, nor will we enter it but together. So if we escape, we shall escape together, and if we perish, we shall perish together." Accordingly both entered, and found that the lion had sprang upon the treasurer, who lay like a sparrow in his grip, calling upon Allah for aid, and signing up with his hands to heaven. Now when Amjad saw this, he took the sword, and rushing upon the lion, smote him between the eyes, and laid him dead upon the ground. The Emir sprang up, marvelling at this escape, and seeing Amjad and As'ad, his master's sons, standing there, cast himself at their feet, and exclaimed, "By Allah, O my lords, it were intolerable wrong in me to do you to death. May the man never be who would kill you. Indeed, with my very life I will ransom you." And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of day, and ceased to say her permitted say. When it was the 224th night, she said, "It hath reached me, O auspicious King, that quoth the treasurer to Amjad and As'ad, 'With my life I will ransom you both.' Then he hastily rose, and at once embracing them, inquired how they had loosed their bonds and come thither. Whereupon they told him how the bonds of one of them had fallen loose, and he had unbound the other. Whereto they were helped by the purity of their intentions, and how they had tracked his trail till they came upon him. So he thanked them for their deed, and went with them forth of the thicket. And when they were in the open country, they said to him, "O uncle, do our father's bidding." He replied, "Allah forbid that I should draw near to you with hurt. But know ye that I mean to take your clothes, and clothe you with mine. Then I will fill 2 vials with the lion's blood, and go back to the king, and tell him I have out you to death. But as for you two, fare ye forth into the lands, for Allah's earth is wide, and know, O my lords, that it paineth me to part from you." At this they all fell a weeping. Then the 2 youths put off their clothes, and the treasurer habited them with his own. Moreover, he made 2 parcels of their dress, and filling 2 vials with the lion's blood, set the parcels before him on his horse's back. Presently he took leave of them, and making his way to the city, ceased not faring till he went in to King Kamar al-Zaman, and kissed the ground between his hands. The king saw him changed in face and troubled, which arose from his adventure with the lion, and deeming this came from the slaughter of his 2 sons, rejoiced, and said to him, "Hast thou done the work?" "Yes, O our lord," replied the treasurer, and gave him the 2 parcels of clothes, and the 2 vials full of blood. Asked the king, "What didst thou observe in them, and did they give thee any charge?" Answered the treasurer, "I found them patient and resigned to do what came down upon them, and they said to me, 'Verily, our father is excusable. Bear him our salutation, and say to him, Thou art quit of our killing, but we charge thee repeat to him these couplets. Verily, women are devils created for us. We seek refuge with God from the artifice of the devils. They are the source of all the misfortunes that have appeared among mankind in the affairs of the world and of religion." When the king heard these words of the treasurer, he bowed his head earthward a long while, and knew his son's words to mean that they had been wrongfully put to death. Then he bethought himself of the perfidy of women and the calamities brought about by them. And he took the 2 parcels and opened them, and fell to turning over his son's clothes and weeping. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of day, and ceased saying her permitted say. When it was the 225th night, she said, "It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that when King Kamar al-Zaman opened the 2 bundles and fell to turning over his son's clothes and weeping, it so came to pass that he found in the pocket of his son As'ad's raiment a letter in the hand of his wife enclosing her hair strings. So he opened it and read it, and understanding the contents knew that the prince had been falsely accused and wronglessly. Then he searched Amjad's parcel of dress and found in his pocket a letter in the handwriting of Queen Hayat al-Nufus, enclosing also her hair strings. So he opened it and read it, and knew that Amjad too had been wronged. Whereupon he beat hand upon hand and exclaimed, "There is no majesty and there is no might save in Allah, the glorious, the great. I have slain my sons unjustly." And he buffeted his face, crying out, "Alas, my sons! Alas, my long grief!" Then he bade them build 2 tombs in one house, which he styled House of Lamentations, and had graved thereupon his sons' names, and threw himself on Amjad's tomb, weeping and groaning and lamenting, and improvised these couplets: "O moon, forever set this earth below, whose loss bewail the stars which stud the sky. O wand which broken, ne'er with bend and wave, shall fascinate the ravished gazer's eyes. These eyne for jealousy I reft of thee, nor shall they till next life thy sight descry. I'm drowned in sea of tears for insomny, wherefore indeed in Sahira's stead I lie." Then he threw himself on As'ad's tomb, groaning and weeping, lamenting and versifying with these couplets: "Indeed I longed to share unweal with thee, but Allah than my will willed otherwise. My grief all blackens twixt mine eyes and space, yet whitens all the blackness from mine eyes. Of tears they weep, these eyne run never dry, and ulcerous flow in vitals never dries. Right sore it irks me seeing thee instead where slave with sovereign for once levelled lies." And his weeping and wailing redoubled, and after he had ended his lamentations and his verse, he forsook his friends and intimates, and denying himself to his women and his family, cut himself off from the world in the House of Lamentations, where he passed his time in weeping for his sons. Such was his case, but as regards Amjad and As'ad, they fared on into the desert, eating of the fruits of the earth and drinking of the remnants of the rain for a full month, till their travel brought them to a mountain of black flint, whose further end was unknown. And here the road forked, one line lying along the midway height, and the other leading to its head. They took the way trending to the top, and gave not over following it 5 days, but saw no end to it, and they were overcome with weariness, being unused to walking upon the mountains, or elsewhere. At last, despairing of coming to the last of the road, they retraced their steps, and taking the other that led over the midway heights. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of day, and ceased to say her permitted say. When it was the 226th night, she said, "It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that Princes Amjad and As'ad returned from the path leading to the mountain head, and took that which ran along the midway heights, and walked through all that day till nightfall, when As'ad, weary with much travel, said to Amjad, 'O my brother, I can walk no farther, for I am exceeding weak.' Replied Amjad, 'O my brother, take courage. Maybe Allah will send us relief.' So they walked on part of the night, till the darkness closed in upon them, when As'ad became weary beyond measure of weariness, and cried out, 'O my brother, I am worn out and spent with walking,' and threw himself upon the ground and wept. Amjad took him in his arms and walked on with him, by times sitting down to rest till break of day. when they came to the mountain top, and found there a stream of running water, and by it a pomegranate tree and a prayer niche. They could hardly believe their eyes when they saw it, but sitting down by that spring, drank of its water and ate of the fruit of that granado tree. After which they lay on the ground and slept till sunrise, when they washed and bathed in the spring, and eating of the pomegranate, slept again till the time of mid-afternoon prayer. Then they thought to continue their journey, but As'ad could not walk, for both his feet were swollen. So they abode there 3 days till they were rested, after which they set out again and fared over the mountain days and nights, tortured by and like to die of thirst, till they sighted a city gleaming afar off, at which they rejoiced and made toward it. When they drew near it, they thanked Allah, be His name exalted, and Amjad said to As'ad, O my brother, sit here whilst I go to yonder city, and see what it is, and whose it is, and where we are in Allah's wide world, that we may know through what lands we have passed in crossing this mountain, whose skirts had we followed, we had not reached this city in a whole year. So praised be Allah for safety. Replied As'ad, By Allah, O my brother, none shall go down into that city save myself, and may I be thy ransom. If thou leave me alone, be it only for an hour, I shall imagine 1,000 things, and be drowned in a torrent of anxiety on thine account, for I cannot brook thine absence from me. Amjad rejoined, Go then, and tarry not. So As'ad took some gold pieces, and leaving his brother to await him, descended the mountain, and ceased not faring on till he entered the city. As he threaded the streets, he was met by an old man, age decrepit, whose beard flowed down upon his breast and forked in twain. He bore a walking staff in his hand, and was richly clad, with a great red turban on his head. When As'ad saw him, he wondered at his dress and his mien. Nevertheless, he went up to him, and saluting him, said, Where be the way to the market, O my master? Hearing these words, the Shaykh smiled in his face and replied, O my son, meseemeth thou art a stranger. As'ad rejoined, Yes, I am a stranger.—And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of day, and ceased saying her permitted say. End of Section 37 of the Book of 1000 Nights and a Night, Volume 3.
Section 38, Volume 3 of the Book of 1000 Nights and a Night, translated by Richard Burton. This is a Librivox recording. All Librivox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit Librivox.org. Recording by D. Wyckoff. The Book of 1000 Nights and a Night, Volume 3, Section 38. When it was the 227th night, she said, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that the Shaykh who met As'ad smiled in his face, and said to him, O my son, meseemeth thou art a stranger. And As'ad replied, Yes, I am a stranger. Then rejoined the old man, Verily thou gladdenest our country with thy presence, O my son, and desolatest thine own land by reason of thine absence. What wantest thou of the market? Quoth As'ad, O uncle, I have a brother, with whom I have come from a far land, and with whom I have journeyed these 3 months. And when we sighted this city, I left him, who is my elder brother, upon the mountain, and came hither, purposing to buy victual and what else, and return therewith to him, that we might feed thereon. Said the old man, Rejoice in all good, O my son, and know thou that today I give a marriage feast, to which I have bidden many guests, and I have made ready plenty of meats, the best and most delicious that heart can desire. So if thou wilt come with me to my place, I will give thee freely all thou lackest, without asking thee a price or aught else. Moreover, I will teach thee the ways of this city, and praised be Allah, O my son, that I and none other have happened upon thee. As thou wilt, answered As'ad. Do as thou art disposed. but make haste, for indeed my brother awaiteth me, and his whole heart is with me." The old man took As'ad by the hand, and carried him to a narrow lane, smiling in his face, and saying, "Glory be to him who hath delivered thee from the people of this city." And he ceased not walking till he entered a spacious house, wherein was a saloon, and behold, in the middle of it were 40 old men, well stricken in years, collected together, and forming a single ring, as they sat round about a lighted fire, to which they were doing worship and prostrating themselves. When As'ad saw this, he was confounded, and the hair of his body stood on end, though he knew not what they were. And the Shaykh said to them, "O elders of the fire, how blessed this day!" Then he called aloud, saying, "Hello, Gazban!" Whereupon there came out to him a tall black slave, of frightful aspect, grim-visaged and flat-nosed as an ape, who, when the old man made a sign to him, bent As'ad's arms behind his back and pinioned them, after which the Shaykh said to him, "Let him down into the vault under the earth, and there leave him, and say to my slave girl such an one, torture him night and day, and give him a cake of bread to eat morning and evening, against the time come of the voyage to the blue sea in the mountain of fire, whereon we will slaughter him as a sacrifice." So the black carried him out at another door, and raising a flag in the floor, discovered a flight of 20 steps, leading to a chamber under the earth, into which he descended with him, and laying his feet in irons, gave him over to the slave girl, and went away. Meanwhile the old men said to one another, "When the day of the festival of the fire cometh, we will sacrifice him on the mountain, as a propitiatory offering, whereby we shall pleasure the fire." Presently the damsel went down to him, and beat him a grievous beating, till streams of blood flowed from his sides, and he fainted. After which she sat at his head a scone of bread and a cruse of brackish water, and went away and left him. In the middle of the night he revived, and found himself bound and beaten and sore with beating, so he wept bitter tears, and recalling his former condition of honor and prosperity, lordship and dominion, and his separation from his sire, and his exile from his native land. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of day, and ceased to say her permitted say. When it was the 228th night, she said to him, "It hath reached me, O auspicious King, that when As'ad found himself bound and beaten and sore with beating, he recalled his whilom condition of honor and prosperity and dominion and lordship, and he wept and groaned aloud, and recited these couplets: Stand by the ruined stead and ask of us, nor deem we dwell there as was state of us. The world that parter hath departed us, yet soothes not hateful hearts the fate of us. With whips a cursed slave girl scourges us, and teems her breast with rancorous hate of us. Allah shall haply deign to unpart our lives, chastise our foes, and end this strait of us. And when As'ad had spoken his poetry, he put out his hands towards his head, and finding there the crust and the cruse full of brackish water, he ate a bittock, just enough to keep life in him, and drank a little water, but could get no sleep till morning for the swarms of bugs and lice. As soon as it was day, the slave girl came down to him and changed his clothes, which were drenched with blood, and stuck to him, so that his skin came off with the shirt. Wherefore he shrieked aloud and cried, Alas! and said, O my God, if this is thy pleasure, increase it upon me. O Lord, verily thou art not unmindful of him that oppresseth me. Do thou then avenge me upon him. And he groaned and repeated the following verses. Patience, O Allah, to thy destiny I bow, suffice me what thou deign decree. Patient to bear thy will, O Lord of me, patient to burn on coals of Gaza tree. They wrong me, visit me with hurt and harm. Haply thy grace from them shall set me free. Far be, O Lord, from thee to spare the wronger. O Lord of destiny, my hope's in thee. And what another saith, bethink thee not of worldly state, leave everything to course of fate. For oft a thing that irketh thee shall in content eventuate, and oft what strait is shall expand, and what expand is wax strait. Allah will do what wills his will, so be not thou importunate. But joy the view of coming weal shall make forget past bale and bait. And when he had ended his verse, the slave girl came down upon him with blows till he fainted again, and throwing him a flap of bread and a gugglet of saltish water, went away and left him sad and lonely, bound in chains of iron, with the blood streaming from his sides, and far from those he loved. So he wept and called to mind his brother, and the honors he erst enjoyed. And Scheherazade perceived the dawn of day, and ceased saying her permitted say. When it was the 229th night, she said, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that As'ad called to mind his brother and the honors he erst enjoyed. So he wept and groaned and complained, and poured forth tears in floods, and improvised these couplets. Easy, O fate, how long this wrong, this injury, robbing each morn and eve my brotherhood from me? Is't not time now thou deem this length sufficiency of woes, and O thou heart of rock, show clemency? My friends thou wrongedst when thou madst each enemy. Mock and exalt me for thy wrongs, thy tyranny. My foeman's heart is solaced by the things he saw in me of strangerhood and lonely misery. Suffice thee not what came upon my head of dole, friends lost for evermore, eyes wan and pale of blee, but must in prison cast so narrow there is naught, save hand to bite with bitten hand for company, and tears that tempest down like goodly gift of cloud, and longing thirst whose fires weet no satiety, regretful yearnings, singles and unceasing sighs, repine, remembrance, and pain's very ecstasy. Desire I suffer sore and melancholy deep, and I must bide a prey to endless frenesy. I find me ne'er a friend who looks with piteous eye, and seeks my presence to allay misery. Say liveth any intimate with trusty love, who for mine ills will groan my sleepless malady? To whom moan I can make, and peradventure he shall pity eyes that sight of sleep can never see? The flea and bug suck up my blood, as white that drinks wine from the proffering hand of fair virginity. Amid the lice my body aye remindeth me of orphans good in Kazi's claw of villainy. My home's a sepulchre that measures cubits 3, where I pass I morn and eve in chained agony. My wines are tears, my clank of chains take music's stead, care's my dessert of fruit, and sorrows are my bed. And when he had versed his verse and prosed his prose, he again groaned and complained, and remembered he had been and how he had been parted from his brother. Thus far concerning him. But as regards his brother Ahmad, he awaited As'ad till midday, yet he had not returned to him, whereupon Ahmad's vitals fluttered, the pangs of parting were sore upon him, and he poured forth abundant tears. And Scheherazade perceived the dawn of day, and ceased to say her permitted say. When it was the 230th night, She said, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that when Ahmad awaited his brother As'ad till midday, and he returned not to him, Ahmad's vitals fluttered. The pangs of parting were sore upon him, and he poured forth abundant tears, exclaiming, Alas, my brother! Alas, my friend! Alas, my grief! How I feared me we should be separated! Then he descended from the mountain top with the tears running down his cheeks, and entering the city ceased not walking till he made the market. He asked the folk the name of the place and concerning its people, and they said, This is called the city of the Magians, and its citizens are mostly given to fire worshipping in lieu of the omnipotent king. Then he inquired of the city of Ebony, and they answered, Of a truth it is a year's journey thither by land, and 6 months by sea. It was governed erst by a king called Armanus, but he took to son-in-law, and made king in his stead a prince called Kamar al-Zaman, distinguished for justice and munificence, equity and benevolence. When Ahmad heard tell of his father, he groaned and wept and lamented, and knew not whither to go. However, he bought a something of food, and carried it to a retired spot, where he sat down thinking to eat. But, recalling his brother, he fell a-weeping, and swallowed but a morsel to keep breath and body together, and that against his will. Then he rose and walked about the city, seeking news of his brother, till he saw a Moslem tailor sitting in his shop. So he sat down by him, and told him his story. Whereupon quoth the tailor, If he have fallen into the hands of the Magians, thou shalt hardly see him again, yet it may be Allah will reunite you twain. But thou, O my brother, he continued, wilt thou lodge with me? Ahmad answered, Yes, and the tailor rejoiced at this. So he abode with him many days, what while the tailor comforted him, and exhorted him to patience, and taught him tailoring, till he became expert in the craft. Now one day he went forth to the seashore, and washed his clothes, after which he entered the bath, and put on clean raiment. Then he walked about the city, to divert himself with its sights, and presently there met him on the way a woman of passing beauty and loveliness, without peer for grace and comeliness. When she saw him, she raised her face veil, and signed to him by moving her eyebrows and her eyes with luring glances, and versified these couplets. I drooped my glance when seen thee on the way, as thou, O slim waist, felled by Sol's hot ray. Thou art the fairest fair that e'er appeared, fairer today than fair of yesterday, where beauty parted a fifth part of it, with Joseph or a part of fifth would stay, the rest would fly to thee. Shine honest, own, be every soul thy sacrifice, I pray. When Ahmad heard these her words, they gladdened his heart, which inclined to her, and his bowels yearned towards her, and the hands of love sported with him. So he sighed to her in reply, and spoke these couplets. Above the rose of cheek is thorn of lance, who dareth pluck it, rashest Chevance? Stretch not thy hand towards it for night long, those lances marred because we snatched a glance. Say her who tyrant is and temper too, though justice might her tempting power enhance. Thy face would add to errors were it veiled, unveiled I see its guard hath best of chance. I cannot look upon Sol's naked face, but can when mist cloud dims his countenance. The honey hive is held by honey bee, ask the tribe guards what wants their vigilance. And they would slay me, let them end their ire, rancorous, and grant us freely to advance. They're not more murderous, and charge the whole, than charging glance of her who wears the mole. And hearing these lines from Ahmad, she sighed with the deepest sighs, and signed to him again, repeated these couplets. "'Tis thou hast trodden coyness path, not I. Grant me thy favours, for the time draws nigh. O thou who makest morn with light of brow, and with loosed brow locks night in lift to sty, thine idle aspect made of me thy slave, tempting as temptest me in days gone by. 'Tis just my liver fry with hottest love, who worship fire, for God must fire abye. Thou sellest like of me for worthless price. If thou must sell, ask high of those who buy." When Amjad heard these her words, he said to her, "Wilt thou come to my lodging, or shall I go with thee to thine?" So she hung her head in shame to the ground, and repeated the words of him whose name be exalted. Men shall have the preeminence above women, because of those advantages wherein Allah hath caused the one of them to excel the other. Upon this Amjad took the hint, and Shahrazad perceived the dawn of day, and ceased saying her permitted say. When it was the 231st Night, she said, It hath reached me, O auspicious King, that Amjad took the woman's hint, and understood that she wished to go with him whither he was going. He felt himself bounder to find a place wherein to receive her, but was ashamed to carry her to the house of his host the tailor. So he walked on, and she walked after him, and the two ceased not walking from street to street and place to place, till she was tired, and said to him, O my lord, where is thy house? Answered he, Before us a little way. Then he turned aside into a handsome by-street, followed by the young woman, and walked on till he came to the end, when he found it was no thoroughfare, and exclaimed, There is no majesty and there is no might, save in Allah, the glorious, the great. Then raising his eyes, he saw, at the upper end of the lane, a great door with 2 stone benches, but it was locked. So Amjad sat down on one of the benches, and she on the other, and she said to him, O my lord, wherefore waitest thou? He bowed his head a while to the ground, and then raised it and answered, I am awaiting my Mameluke who hath the key, for I bade him make me ready meat and drink and flowers to deck the wine service against my return from the bath. But he said to himself, Haply the time will be tedious to her, and she will go about her business, leaving me here, when I will wend my own way. However, as soon as she was weary of the long waiting, she said, O my lord, thy Mameluke delayeth, and here we are sitting in the street. And she arose and took a stone and went up to the lock. Said Amjad, Be not in haste, but have patience till the servant come home. However, she hearkened not to him, but smote the wooden bolt with the stone, and broke it in half, whereupon the door opened. Quoth he, What possessed thee to do this deed? Quoth she, Pooh, my lord, what matter it? Is not the house thy house and thy place? He said there was no need to break the bolt. Then the damsel entered, to the confusion of Amjad, who knew not what to do for fear of the people of the house. But she said to him, Why dost thou not enter, O light of mine eyes and core of my heart? Replied he, I hear and obey, but my servant tarrieth long, and I know not if he have done aught of what I bade him, and specially enjoined upon him or not. Hereupon he entered, sore in fear of the people of the house, and found himself in a handsome saloon with 4 dazed recesses, each facing each other, and containing closets and raised seats, all bespread with stuffs of silk and brocade, and in the midst was a jetting fountain of costly fashion, on whose margin rested a covered tray of meats, with a leather tablecloth hanging up, and gem-encrusted dishes, full of fruits and sweet-scented flowers. Hard by stood drinking vessels and a candlestick with a single wax candle therein, and the place was full of precious stuffs, and was ranged with chests and stools, and on each seat lay a parcel of clothes, upon which was a purse full of moneys, gold and silver. The floor was paved with marble, and the house bore witness in every part to its owner's fortune. When Ahmad saw all this, he was confused at his case, and said to himself, I am a lost man. Verily we are Allah's, and to Allah we are returning. As for the damsel, when she sighted the place, she rejoiced indeed with a joy nothing could exceed, and said to him, By Allah, O my lord, thy servant hath not failed of his duty, for see, he hath swept the place, and cooked the meat, and set on the fruit, and indeed I come at the best of times. But he paid no heed to her, his heart being taken up with fear of the housefolk. And she said, Fie, O my lord, O my heart, what aileth thee to stand thus? Then she sighed, and giving him a buss, which sounded like the cracking of a walnut, said, O my lord, an thou have made an appointment with other than thee, I will gird my middle and serve her and thee. Ahmad laughed from a heart full of rage and wrath, and came forwards and sat down, panting, and saying to himself, Alack, mine ill death and doom when the owner of the place shall return. Then she seated herself by him, and fell to toying and laughing, whilst Ahmad sat careful and frowning, thinking 1,000 thoughts, and communing with himself. Assuredly the master of the house cannot but come, and then what shall I say to him? He needs must kill me, and my life will be lost thus foolishly. Presently she rose, and tucking up her sleeves, took a tray of food, on which she laid the cloth, and then set it before Ahmad, and began to eat, saying, Eat, O my lord. So he came forward and ate, but the food was not pleasant to him. On the contrary, he ceased not to look towards the door, till the damsel had eaten her fill, when she took away the tray of the meats, and, setting on the dessert, fell to eating of the dried fruits. Then she brought the wine service, and, opening the jar, filled a cup, and handed it to Ahmad, who took it from her hand, saying to himself, Ah, and well away, when the master of the house cometh and seeth me. And he kept his eyes fixed on the threshold, even with the cup in hand. While he was in this case, lo, in came the master of the house, who was a white slave, one of the chief men of the city, being master of the horse to the king. He had fitted up this saloon for his pleasures, that he might make merry therein, and be private with whom he would. And he had that day bidden a youth whom he loved, and had made this entertainment for him. Now the name of this slave was Bahadur, and he was open of hand, generous, munificent, and fain of almsgiving and charitable works. And Scheherazade perceived the dawn of the day, and ceased to say her permitted say. End of section 38 of the Book of 1,000 Nights and a Night, Volume 3. Recording by D. Wyckoff.
Section 39, Volume 3 of the Book of 1,000 Nights and a Night, translated by Richard Burton. This is a Librivox recording. All Librivox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit Librivox.org. Recording by Christian Plasberg. The Book of 1,000 Nights and a Night, Volume 3, Section 39. When it was the 232nd night, she said, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that when Badur, the master of the horse and the owner of the house, came to the door of the saloon and found it open, he entered slowly and softly, and looking in, with head advanced and outstretched neck, saw Amjad and the girl sitting before the dish of fruit and the wine jar in front of them. Now Amjad at that moment had the cup in his hand, and his face turned to the door. And when his glance met Badur's eyes, his hue turned pale yellow, and his side muscles quivered. So seeing his trouble, Badur signed to him with his finger on his lips, as much as to say, Be silent, and come hither to me. Whereupon he set down the cup and rose, and the damsel cried, Whither away? He shook his head, and signing to her that he wished to make water, went out into the passage barefoot. Now when he saw Badur, he knew him for the master of the house. So he hastened to him, and kissing his hand, said to him, Allah upon thee, O Lord, ere thou do me a hurt, hear what I have to say. Then he told him who he was from first to last, and acquainted him with what caused him to quit his native land and royal state, and how he had not entered his house of his free will, but that it was the girl who had broken the lock-bolt and done all this. When Badur heard his story and knew that he was a king's son, he felt for him, and taking compassion on him, said, Hearken to me, O Amjad, and do what I bid thee, and I will guarantee thy safety from that thou fearest. But if thou cross me, I will kill thee. Amjad replied, Command thee as thou wilt. I will not gainsay thee in aught. No, never, for I am the freedman of thy bounty. Rejoined Badur, Then go back forthwith into the saloon, sit down in thy place, and be at peace and shine ease. I will presently come in to thee, and when thou seest me, remember my name is Badur. Do thou revile me, and rail at me, saying, What made thee tarry till so late, and accept no excuse from me? Nay, so far from it, rise and beat me, and if thou spare me, I will do away thy life. Enter now and make merry, and whatsoever thou seekest of me at this time I will bring thee forthwith. And do thou spend this night as thou wilt, and on the morrow wend thy way. This I do in honor of the strangerhood, for I love the stranger and hold myself bounder to do him devoir. So Amjad kissed his hand, and returning to the saloon with his face clad in its natural white and red, at once said to the damsel, O my mistress, thy presence hath gladdened this shine-own place, and ours is indeed a blessed night. Quoth the girl, Verily I see a wonderful change in thee, that thou now welcomest me so cordially. So Amjad answered, By Allah, O my lady, methought my servant Badur had robbed me of some necklaces of jewels worth 10,000 dinars each. However, when I went out but now in concern for this, I sought for them and found them in their place. I know not why the slave tarrieth so long, and needs must I punish him for it. She was satisfied with his answer, and they sported and drank and made merry, and ceased not to be so till near sundown, when Badur came in to them, having changed his clothes and girt his middle and put on shoes as are worn of Mamelukes. He saluted and kissed the ground, then held his hands behind him and stood, with his head hanging down, as one who confesseth to a fault. So Amjad looked at him with angry eyes and asked, Why hast thou tarried till now, O most pestilent of slaves? Answered Badur, O my lord, I was busy washing my clothes, and knew not of thy being there, for our appointed time was nightfall, and not daytide. But Amjad cried out at him, saying, Thou liest, O vilest of slaves! By Allah, I must needs beat thee. So he rose, and throwing Badur prone on the ground, took a stick and beat him gently. But the damsel sprang up, and snatching the stick from his hand, came down upon Badur so lustily that in extreme pain the tears ran from his eyes, and he ground his teeth together and called out for succor, whilst Amjad cried out to the girl, Don't! And she cried out, Let me satisfy my anger upon him, till at last he pulled the stick out of her hand and pushed her away. So Badur rose, and wiping away his tears from his cheeks, waited upon them the while, after which he swept the hall and lighted the lamps. But as often as he went in and out, the lady abused him and cursed him, till Amjad was wroth with her, and said, For Almighty Allah's sake, leave my Mameluke. He is not used to this. Then they sat and ceased not eating and drinking, and Badur waiting upon them till midnight, when, being weary with service and beating, he fell asleep in the midst of the hall, and snored and snorted. Whereupon the damsel, who was drunk with wine, said to Amjad, Arise, take the sword hanging yonder, and cut me off this slave's head, and if thou do it not, I will be the death of thee. What possesseth thee to slay my slave? asked Amjad. And she answered, Our joyaunce will not be complete but by his death. If thou wilt not kill him, I will do it myself. By Allah's rights to thee, do not this thing. Quoth she, It must perforce be, and taking down the sword, drew it and made it Bahadur to kill him. But Amjad said in his mind, This man hath entreated us courteously, and sheltered us, and done us kindness, and made himself my slave. Shall we requite him by slaughtering him? This shall never be. Then he said to the woman, If my Mameluke must be killed, better I should kill him than thou. So saying, he took the sword from her, and, raising his hand, smote her on the neck, and made her head fly from her body. It fell upon Bahadur, who awoke, and sat up and opened his eyes, when he saw Amjad standing by him, and in his hand the sword dyed with blood, and the damsel lying dead. He inquired what had passed, and Amjad told him all she had said, adding, Nothing would satisfy her, but she must slay thee, and this is her reward. Then Bahadur arose, and kissing the prince's hand, said to him, Would to heaven thou hadst spared her, but now there is nothing for it but to rid us of her without stay or delay, before the daybreak. Then he girded his loins, and took the body, wrapped it in an Abba cloak, and laying it in a large basket of palm leaves, he shouldered it, saying, Thou art a stranger here, and knowest no one. So sit thou in this place, and await my return till daybreak. If I come back to thee, I will assuredly do thee great good service, and use my endeavors to have news of thy brother. But if by sunrise I return not, know that all is over with me, and peace be on thee, and the house and all it containeth of stuffs and money are shine. Then he fared forth from the saloon, bearing the basket, and threading the streets, he made for the salt sea, thinking to throw it therein. But as he drew near the shore, he turned and saw that the chief of police and his officers had ranged themselves around him. And on recognizing him, they wondered, and opened the basket, wherein they found the slain woman. So they seized him, and laid him in bilboes all that night till the morning, when they carried him and the basket, as it was, to the king, and reported the case. The king was sore enraged when he looked upon the slain, and said to Bahadur, Woe to thee! Thou art always so doing. Thou killest folk, and castest them into the sea, and takest their goods. How many murders hast thou done ere this? Thereupon Bahadur hung his head, and Scheherazade perceived the dawn of day, and ceased saying her permitted say. When it was the 233rd night, she said, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that Bahadur hung down his head groundwards before the king, who cried out at him, saying, Woe to thee! Who killed this girl? He replied, O my lord, I killed her, and there is no majesty and there is no might save in Allah, the glorious, the great. So the king in his anger commanded to hang him, and the hangman went down with him by the king's commandment, and the chief of police accompanied him with a crier who called upon all the folk to witness the execution of Bahadur, the king's master of the horse. And on this wise they paraded him through the main streets and the market streets. This is how it fared with Bahadur. But as regards Amjad, he waited his host's return till the day broke and the sun rose. When he saw that he came not, he exclaimed, There is no majesty and there is no might save in Allah, the glorious, the great. Would I knew what this is become of him. And, as he sat musing, behold, he heard the crier proclaiming Bahadur's sentence, and bidding the people to see the spectacle of his hanging at midday. Whereat he wept, and exclaimed, Verily we are Allah's, and to him we are returning. He meaneth to sacrifice himself unjustly for my sake, when it was who slew her. By Allah, this shall never be. Then he went from the saloon, and shutting the door after him, hurriedly threaded the streets till he overtook Bahadur, when he stood before the chief of police and said to him, O my lord, put not Bahadur to death, for he is innocent. By Allah, none killed her but I. Now, when the captain of police heard these words, he took them both, and carrying them before the king, acquainted him with what Amjad had said. Whereupon he looked at the prince, and asked him, Didst thou kill the damsel? He answered, Yes. And the king said, Tell me why thou killedst her, and speak the truth. Replied Amjad, O king, it is indeed a marvelous event, and a wondrous matter that hath befallen me. Were it graven with needles on the eye corners, it would serve as a warner to whoso would be warned. Then he told him his whole story, and informed him of all that had befallen him and his brother, first and last. Whereat the king was much startled and surprised, and said to him, Know that now I find thee to be excusable. But list, O youth, wilt thou be my wazir? Hearkening and obedience, answered Amjad. Whereupon the king bestowed magnificent dresses of honor on him and Badur, and gave him a handsome house, with eunuchs and officers and all things needful, appointing him stipends and allowances, and bidding him make search for his brother Asad. So Amjad sat down, invested and deposed, and took and gave. Moreover, he sent out a crier to cry his brother throughout the city, and for many days made proclamation in the main streets and market streets, but heard no news of Asad, nor happened on any trace of him. Such was his case. But as regards his brother, the Magi ceased not to torture Asad night and day, and eve and morn for a whole year's space, till their festival drew near, when the old man Bahram made ready for the voyage, and fitted out a ship for himself. And Scheherazade perceived the dawn of day, and ceased to say her permitted say. When it was the 234th night, she said, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that Bahram, the Magian, having fitted out a ship for the voyage, took Asad and put him in a chest which he locked, and had it transported on board. Now it so came to pass that, at the very time of shipping it, Amjad was standing to divert himself by looking upon the sea. And when he saw the men carrying the gear and shipping it, his heart throbbed, and he called to his pages to bring him his beast. Then, mounting with a company of his officers, he rode down to the seaside, and halted before the Magian ship, which he commanded his men to board and search. They did his bidding, and boarded the vessel, and rummaged in every part, but found nothing. So they returned and told Amjad, who mounted again and rode back. But he felt troubled in mind, and when he reached his place and entered his palace, he cast his eyes on the wall, and saw written thereon 2 lines, which were these couplets: My friends, if ye are banished from mine eyes, from heart and mind ye ne'er go wandering. But ye have left me in my woe, and rob rest from my eyelids while ye are slumbering. And seeing them, Amjad thought of his brother and wept. Such was his case. But as for Bahram, the Magian, he embarked and shouted and bawled to his crew to make sail in all haste. So they shook out the sails and departed, and ceased not to fare on many days and nights. And every other day Bahram took out Asad, and gave him a bit of bread, and made him drink a sup of water, till they drew near the mountain of fire. Then there came out on them a storm wind, and the sea rose against them, so that the ship was driven out of her course till she shook a wrong line, and fell into strange waters. And at last they came in sight of a city builded upon the shore, with a castle whose windows overlooked the main. Now the ruler of this city was a queen called Marjana, and the captain said to Bahram, O my lord, we have strayed from our course, and come to the island of Queen Marjana, who is a devout Moslama, and if she knew that we are Magians, she will take our ship and slay us to the last man. Yet needs must we put in here to rest and refit. Quoth Bahram, Right is thy recking. Whatso thou seest fit that I will do. Said the shipmaster, If the queen summon us and question us, how shall we answer her? And Bahram replied, Let us clothe this Moslem we have with us in a Mameluke's habit, and carry him ashore with us, so that when the queen sees him, she will suppose and say, This is a slave. As for me, I will tell her that I am a slave dealer who buys and sells white slaves, and that I had with me many, but have sold all save this one, whom I retain to keep my accounts, for he can read and write. And the captain said, This device should serve. Presently they reached the city, and slackened sail, and cast the anchors. And the ship lay still, when, behold, Queen Marjana came down to them, attended by her guards, and halting before the vessel, called out to the captain, who landed and kissed the ground before her. Quoth she, What is the lading of this thy ship, and who hast thou with thee? Quoth he, O queen of the age, I have with me a merchant who dealeth in slaves. And she said, Hither with him to me. Whereupon Bahram came ashore to her, and with Asad walking behind him in a slave's habit, and kissed the earth before her. She asked, What is thy condition? And he answered, I am a dealer in chattels. Then she looked at As'ad, and taking him for a Mameluke, asked him, "What is thy name, O youth?" He answered, "Dost thou ask my present or my former name?" "Hast thou then two names?" inquired she, and he replied, and indeed his voice was choked with tears, "Yes, my name aforetime was Al-Asad, the most happy, but now it is Al-Mutar, Miseramus." Her heart inclined to him, and she said, "Canst thou write?" "Yes," answered he, and she gave him inkcase, and reed pen, and paper, and said to him, "Write somewhat that I may see it." So he wrote these 2 couplets. What can the slave do when pursued by fate? O justice judge, whatever be his state, whom God throws hand bound into the depths and says, "Beware, lest water should thy body wet." Now when she read these lines, she had wrath upon him, and said to Bahram, "Sell me this slave." He replied, "O my lady, I cannot sell him, for I have parted with all the rest, and none is left with me but he." Quoth the queen, "I must need have him of thee, either by sale or way of gift." But quoth Bahram, "I will neither sell him nor give him." Whereat she was wroth, and, taking As'ad by the hand, carried him up to the castle, and sent to Bahram, saying, "Except thou set sail and depart our city this very night, I will seize all thy goods and break up thy ship." Now when the message reached the Magian, he grieved with sore grief, and cried, "Verily this voyage is on no wise to be commended." Then he arose, and made ready, and took all he needed, and awaited the coming of the night to resume his voyage, saying to the sailors, "Provide yourselves with your things, and fill your water-skins, that we may set sail at the last of the night." So the sailors did their business, and awaited the coming of darkness. Such was their case. But as regards Queen Marjanah, when she had brought As'ad into the castle, she opened the casements overlooking the sea, and bade her handmaids bring food. They set food before As'ad and herself, and both ate, after which the queen called for wine. And Scheherazade perceived the dawn of day, and ceased saying her permitted say. End of section 39 of the Book of 1000 Nights and a Night, Volume 3. Recording by Christian Plasberg of Winchester, Virginia, and christianplasberg.com.
Section 40, Volume 3 of the Book of 1000 Nights and a Night, translated by Richard Burton. This is a Librivox recording. All Librivox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit librivox.org. Recording by Nicholas James Bridgewater. The Book of 1000 Nights and a Night, Volume 3, Section 40. When it was the 235th night, she said, "It hath reached me, O auspicious King, that when Queen Marjanah bade her handmaids bring wine, and they set it before her, she fell to drinking with As'ad. Now Allah, be he extolled and exalted, filled her heart with love for the prince, and she kept filling his cup and handing it to him till his reason fled, and presently he rose and left the hall to satisfy a call of nature. As he passed out of the saloon, he saw an open door, through which he went and walked on till his walk brought him to a vast garden full of all manner of fruits and flowers, and sitting down under a tree, he did his occasion. Then he rose and went up to a jetting fountain in the garden, and made the lesser ablution, and washed his hands and face, after which he would have risen to go away. But the air smote him, and he fell back, with his clothes undone, and slept, and night overcame him thus. So far concerning him. But as concerns Bahram, the night being come, he cried out to his crew, saying, "Set sail and let us away." And they answered, "We hear and obey, but wait till we fill our water-skins, and then we will set sail." So they landed with their water-skins, and went round about the castle, and found nothing but garden walls. Whereupon they climbed over into the garden, and followed the track of feet, which led them to the fountain, and there they found As'ad lying on his back. They knew him, and were glad to find him, and after filling their water skins, they bore him off, and climbed the wall again with him, and carried him back in haste to Bahram, to whom they said, Hear the good tidings of thy winning thy wish, and gladden thy heart, and beat thy drums, and sound thy pipes, for thy prisoner, whom Queen Marjanah took from thee by force, we have found and brought back to thee. And they threw As'ad down before him. When Bahram saw him, his heart leapt for joy, and his breast swelled with gladness. Then he bestowed largesse on the sailors, and bade them set sail in haste. So they sailed forthright, intending to make the mountain of fire, and stayed not their course till the morning. This is how it fared with them. But as regards Queen Marjanah, she abode a while after As'ad went down from her, awaiting his return in vain, for he came not. Thereupon she rose and sought him, yet found no trace of him. Then she bade her women light flambeaux and look for him, whilst she went forth in person, and seeing the garden door open, knew that he had gone thither. So she went out into the garden, and finding his sandals lying by the fountain, searched the place in every part, but came upon no sign of him. And yet she gave not over the search till morning. Then she inquired for the ship, and they told her, the vessel set sail in the first watch of the night, wherefore she knew that they had taken As'ad with them, and this was grievous to her, and she was sore and angered. She bade equip 10 great ships forthwith, and making ready for fight, embarked in one of the 10 with her Mamelukes, and slave women, and men at arms, all splendidly accoutred and weaponed for war. They spread the sails, and she said to the captains, If you overtake the Magian's ship, ye shall have of me dresses of honour and largesse of money. But if you fail so to do, I will slay you to the last man. Whereat fear and great hope animated the crews, and they sailed all that day and the night, and the 2nd day, and the 3rd day, till, on the 4th, they sighted the ship of Bahram the Magian, and before evening fell, the Queen's squadron had surrounded it on all sides, just as Bahram had taken As'ad forth of the chest, and was beating and torturing him, whilst the prince cried out for help and deliverance, but found neither helper nor deliverer. And the grievous bastinado sorely tormented him. Now, while so occupied, Bahram chanced to look up, and seeing himself encompassed by the Queen's ships, as the white of the eye encompasseth the black, he gave himself up for lost, and groaned, and said, Woe to thee, O As'ad! This is all out of thy head. Then taking him by the hand, he bade his men throw him overboard, and cried, By Allah, I will slay thee before I die myself. So they carried him along by the hands and feet, and cast him into the sea, and he sank. But Allah, be he extolled and exalted, willed that his life be saved, and that his doom be deferred. So he caused him to sink and rise again, and he struck out with his hands and feet, till the Almighty gave him relief, and sent him deliverance, and the waves bore him far from the Magian's ship, and threw him ashore. He landed, scarce crediting his escape, and once more on land he doffed his clothes, and wrung them, and spread them out to dry, whilst he sat naked and weeping over his condition, and bewailing his calamities and mortal dangers, and captivity and strangerhood. And presently he repeated these 2 couplets: Allah, my patience fails, I have no ward. My breast is straitened, and clean cut my cord. To whom shall wretched slave of case complain, save to his Lord, O thou of lords the Lord? Then having ended his verse, he rose and donned his clothes, but he knew not whither to go or whence to come. So he fed on the herbs of the earth, and the fruits of the trees, and he drank of the streams, and fared on night and day, till he came in sight of a city, whereupon he rejoiced and hastened his pace. But when he reached it, and Shahrazad perceived the dawn of day, and ceased to say her permitted say. When it was the 236th Night, she said, It hath reached me, O auspicious King, that when he reached the city, the shades of evening closed around him, and the gates were shut. Now by the decrees of fate and man's lot, this was the very city wherein he had been a prisoner, and to whose king his brother Amjad was minister. When As'ad saw the gate was locked, he turned back and made for the burial ground, where finding a tomb without a door, he entered therein and lay down and fell asleep, with his face covered by his long sleeve. Meanwhile, Queen Marjanah, coming up with Bahrom's ship, questioned him of As'ad. Now the Magian, when Queen Marjanah overtook him with her ships, baffled her by his artifice and gramarye, swearing to her that he was not with him, and that he knew nothing of him. She searched the ship, but found no trace of her friend. So she took Bahram, and carrying him back to her castle, would have him put to death. But he ransomed himself from her with all his good and his ship, and she released him and his men. They went forth from her hardly believing in their deliverance, and fared on 10 days' journey, till they came to their own city, and found the gate shut, it being eventide. So they made for the burial ground, thinking to lie the night there, and going round about the tombs, as fate and fortune would have it, saw the building wherein As'ad lay wide open, whereat Bahram marvelled and said, I must look into this sepulchre. Then he entered and found As'ad lying in a corner fast asleep, with his head covered by his sleeve. So he raised his head, and looking in his face, knew him for the man on whose account he had lost his good and his ship, and cried, What, art thou yet alive? Then he bound him, and gagged him without further parley, and carried him to his house, where he clapped heavy shackles on his feet, and lowered him into the underground dungeon aforesaid prepared for the tormenting of Muslims, and he bade his daughter by name Bustan torture him night and day, till the next year, when they would again visit the mountain of fire, and there offer him up as a sacrifice. Then he beat him grievously, and locking the dungeon door upon him, gave the keys to his daughter. By and by Bustan opened the door, and went down to beat him, but finding him a comely youth, and a sweet face, with arched brows and eyes black with nature's kohl, she fell in love with him, and asked him, What is thy name? My name is As'ad, answered he, whereat she cried, Mayst thou indeed be happy as thy name, and happy be thy days. Thou deservest not torture and blows, and I see thou hast been injuriously entreated. And she comforted him with kind words, and loosed his bonds. Then she questioned him of the religion of Al-Islam, and he told her that it was the true and right faith, and that our Lord Muhammad had approved himself by surpassing miracles and signs manifest, and that fire worship is harmful and not profitable. And he went on to expound to her the tenets of Al-Islam, till she was persuaded, and the love of the true faith entered her heart. Then, as Almighty Allah had mixed up with her being a fond affection for As'ad, she pronounced the 2 testimonies of the faith, and became of the people of felicity. After this she bought him meat and drink, and talked with him, and they prayed together. Moreover, she made him chicken stews, and fed him therewith, till he regained strength, and his sickness left him, and he was restored to his former health. Such things befell him with the daughter of Bahram the Magian. And so it happened that one day she left him and stood at the house door, when behold, she heard the crier crying aloud and saying, Whoso hath with him a handsome young man, whose favour is thus and thus, and bringeth him forth, shall have all he seeketh of money. But if any have him and deny it, he shall be hanged over his own door, and his property shall be plundered, and his blood go for naught. Now As'ad had acquainted Bustan bint Bahram with his whole history. So when she heard the crier, she knew it was he who was sought for, and, going down to him, told him the news. Then he fared forth and made for the mansion of the Wazir, whom, when As'ad saw, exclaimed, By Allah, this minister is my brother Amjad. Then he went up, and the damsel walking behind him, to the palace, where he again saw his brother, and threw himself upon him, whereupon Amjad also knew him, and fell upon his neck, and they embraced each other, whilst the Wazir's Mamelukes dismounted and stood round them. They lay a while insensible, and when they came to themselves, Amjad took his brother and carried him to the Sultan, to whom he related the whole story, and the Sultan charged him to plunder Bahram's house. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of day, and ceased saying her permitted say. When it was the 237th night, she said, It hath reached me, O auspicious King, that the Sultan ordered Amjad to plunder Bahram's house, and to hang its owner. So Amjad dispatched thither for that purpose a company of men, who sacked the house and took Bahram and brought his daughter to the Wazir, by whom she was received with all honour, for As'ad had told his brother the torments he had suffered, and the kindness she had done him. Thereupon Amjad related in his turn to As'ad all that had passed between himself and the damsel, and how he had escaped hanging and had become Wazir, and they made moan each to other of the anguish they had suffered for separation. Then the Sultan summoned Bahram and bade strike off his head, but he said, O most mighty King, art thou indeed resolved to put me to death? Replied the King, Yes, except thou save thyself by becoming a Muslim. Quoth Bahram, O King, bear with me a little while. Then he bowed his head groundwards, and presently raising it again, made profession of the faith, and Islamized at the hands of the Sultan. They all rejoiced at his conversion, and Amjad and As'ad told him all that had befallen them, whereat he wondered and said, O my lords, make ready for the journey, and I will depart with you, and carry you back to your father's court in a ship. At this they rejoiced, and wept with sore weeping, but he said, O my lords, weep not for your departure, for it shall reunite you with those you love, even as were Ni'mah and Naomi. And what befell Ni'mah and Naomi? Asked they. They tell, replied Bahram, but Allah alone is all-knowing, the following tale. End of Volume 3. End of Section 40 of the Book of 1000 Nights and a Night, Volume 3. Recording by Nicholas James Bridgewater. Recorded in London, England.